Hello everyone, and welcome to another amazing story. What if the Ashen One was in Ruby? Silkdreamweaver wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Chapter 7, Teacher and Student. Ruby was nervous. She tightly clutched the book she brought with her to her chest. Today would be her third day with Ashen. It also happens to be the first day she would truly be alone. There would be no rwby today or Dad hanging around nearby at the top of the cliff or Yang sparring with him in the clearing leading up to the cliffs. She took a deep breath to calm herself. It wasn't the idea of being alone that had her on edge. It was what she was planning on proposing to Ashen today that did. They had finished going over her map of Remnant yesterday. While she wasn't able to tell him much about Atlas or Mistral, she had a lot she was able to tell him about Vale and Vacuo. She did have to admit that a lot of her information on Vacuo was from stories Uncle Crow told her, but she trusted them. Now that they had finished with that, it left them with not much else to talk about. She was certain that Ashen had plenty of stories to tell, but he didn't seem to be in a sharing mood. Ruby spent all night racking her brain for an idea. It was only when she nearly tripped on one of her old books did inspiration strike her. As usual, Ashen appeared out of thin air as he sat, waiting for her. He hasn't told her how he was doing it, but she was certain that after she gained enough of his trust, he would. Maybe he might even show her how to do it herself. She greeted him with a wave and a smile. "Morning." "Good morning to you as well," he replied as she took her seat next to him. "I see that rwby has not accompanied you today." Technically he was supposed to, but she didn't want to wake him from his nap, and her dad and sister were out grocery shopping. "He's getting some rest, so it's just the two of us today." Ashen nodded before he gestured to the book in her arms. "What did you bring with you?" Ruby's face flushed red as she pulled the book from her chest to display the cover to him. It was an old bright pink ABC book. She still kept it around after all these years because the drawings in it were too cute for her to get rid of it. "Looks colorful," he commented. She could barely make out a tinge of amusement in his voice, which did nothing to help with the burning sensation growing on her face. "I brought it for you," she stated. "A gift? I appreciate the thought, but unfortunately, as you should already know, I cannot read your language. That's why I brought it. This is a book that's supposed to teach you to read. I thought it could help you." "You want to teach me how to read?" Ashen asked, surprised. "Why yeah," Ruby stuttered. Her face was now glowing. Here she was, a child, offering to teach him, an adult, how to read. "You couldn't read the map I brought, and it made me think about what you would do if you didn't have someone around to help you." Ashen stayed quiet. Ruby wished he would take off his helmet. It would be easier to know what he was thinking if she could see his face. She hoped that she hadn't offended him. "So, you wish to become my teacher? Very well. It will not be the first time that I served as a student, but it will be the first time that I have been taught by someone so much more smaller than me." "Hey!" Ruby cried in indignation. She crossed her arms in a pout, causing Ashen to chuckle. It was only a jest. "Now, how do you want to begin?" Ruby had Ashen start off by going over the basic alphabet. At some point he picked up a stick that he would use to write down letters in the dirt. She made a mental note to herself to bring a pencil and some paper for him. Thankfully all the words in the book were basic. It wasn't that she thought he was stupid, he was in fact very sharp and was adapting quickly. She was just concerned over what she would do when they got to more complex words and how she would explain them to him. When they hit the word car, the best description she was able to come up with for him was a wagon that drove itself. For now, Ruby was enjoying the time she had to bond with him. She even learned a bit more about him from some absent-minded comments he made. From what she could understand, he had a lot of teachers that trained and taught him throughout the years. One of them appeared to have been a traveling scholar who researched the soul. Considering how amazing Aura was, she wasn't surprised. She wanted to ask questions but restrained herself. The last thing she wanted to do was cause him to withdraw into himself. It was something she learned from watching Uncle Crow help her dad. Before she knew it, the alarm on her scroll was going off, causing Ashen to jerk in surprise. Ruby silenced it with a frown. Time always seemed to move far too quickly when she didn't want it to. "I assume it is time for you to go home," Ashen commented. She nodded. "Then we will have to continue tomorrow. Do you think you could bring another book with you? Perhaps something more complex?" "Sure," Ruby responded with a faint blush of embarrassment dusting her cheeks. "I'll ask my dad if he knows any good ones that could help us. He is a teacher after all." "Your father is a scholar?" "What? No, he's a teacher at Signal. It's a prep school that people go through if they want to attend a combat academy like Beacon," she explained. "I see. I guess it would be safe to say that you intend to join this Beacon Academy. Yep. My parents and uncle all graduated from there. It's supposed to be the best academy in all of Remnant. Me and my sister are both planning to go there as well. Has your father done anything to prepare you for your chosen path? Ashen asked. Not yet, she replied. He said he'll start training me in a few years like he started doing with Yang. Usually, if a person intends to train a new warrior, they would start the individual off as young as possible, Ashen explained. It takes time to properly train a person up to standard. Years of harsh training to build the body up to a warrior's physique and to engrave the muscle memory of various combat techniques. Is that what you went through? Ruby asked. Ashen snorted. I went through a baptism by fire. What do you mean? While I may no longer remember my childhood, I still have a few memories of my youth. From what I can still piece together, my home was a village on the edge of the kingdom. Most of us were farmers that spent our days toiling the fields to provide for ourselves. We had a craftsman, a blacksmith I remember fighting with. There were walls built to protect us with a small contingent of guards. It would not be enough, however. Ashen chuckled. I did not want to spend my life farming the same patch of land. I wished to travel and lead a life of adventure. I got my wish. Ashen hung his head and went silent. Ruby reached over and slipped her hand into his. He gave it a gentle squeeze. After taking a deep breath, he continued. Death was overtaking the land. Villages were falling left and right. Suddenly, the defenses we had were not enough to protect us. It was decided that every able-bodied man would be trained to fight. I was more than twice your age when a blade was first put in my hand. I was trained for half a year. Half a year before I received my first taste of combat. Was it the Grim? Worse. It was marauders. My village was attacked, not by beasts, but by our fellow man. It was the first time I had ever seen a man die. It also became the first time I had killed a man. I killed 2 that day. I believe nothing but dumb luck and the favor of the gods saw me through that day. We lost many. For those of us left, our training had come to an end. We had to man the walls with the little experience we had earned to fill the vacant posts. I had to learn everything else through trial and error. Every mistake was paid for in scars, failures, and comrades lost. Ashen released a wistful sigh as old faces flashed through his mind. I will defer to your father's experience and trust that he knows what he is doing, but do not let your time be wasted. Time is valuable but also fleeting. The more time you have to train, the more prepared you will be to face hardship. I will be, Ruby whispered. She leaned over and gave him a hug. It felt like he needed one. Does it hurt, remembering everything? She asked. I wish it did. So many memories have become so faded that I no longer feel a thing. Some memories are nothing but sensations. Despite it all, I will continue to endure. Do not waste your concern on me. I have made it this far and will continue to live on. He patted Ruby on her shoulder. You should run along now before your father grows concerned. I will see you tomorrow. Okay, Ruby responded as she gathered her things. I'll bring something to write with tomorrow. Stay safe. The trek back was quiet. It gave Ruby a lot of time to think. An unpleasant feeling churned in her guts as she thought over what she had learned. She couldn't imagine what it must have been like to have to face the Grim with no training. Even worse was how bad guys attacked his home. Why did they still have to deal with bad guys, even though they already had enough trouble fighting the Grim? It wasn't fair. She wondered if Ashen blamed himself for what had happened. There had to be something more she could do to help him. Ruby stopped walking as she gazed through the tree branches at the clouds. There was only so much she had to do to help him read. All he really had to do was memorize the characters and the spelling of words. Considering how sharp he was, it didn't seem like that would prove to be much of a problem for him. There had to be something else she could do for him. Ruby glanced down at the book in her arms. What else could she help him with? As she stared at the letters on the cover, her mind drifted back to when Ashen showed her the strange characters carved into his knife. Perhaps she didn't have to teach him something. Maybe he could teach her. He did mention that the language was almost forgotten. She could help make it less forgotten. Ruby nodded, impressed with herself. After she was done teaching him her alphabet, he could teach her his. It was a brilliant idea and would increase the time they got to spend together. She still hadn't forgotten what Ashen had said about eventually leaving, so she needed to stretch out their time together to delay that from happening for as long as possible. This was just a single step toward helping him. Every hero deserves a happy ending, and she was going to do everything she could so that, eventually, Ashen would get his. It was as her dad and Uncle Crow would say, take it one step at a time. The next day went by without a hitch. Her dad had given her a dictionary and one of his lesson books to borrow that he used for his youngest students. She had even brought a notebook for him to write in. Ruby, unfortunately, didn't learn anything new about Ashen. He kept their discussions focused on the material they were covering, no doubt, in an effort to avoid sharing anything else about himself. While she did wish that she could have learned more about him, she was not going to push. She did notice, though, how he swapped out his gauntlets for a pair of leather gloves. It was curious why he didn't just write with his bare hands, but she decided not to question him over it. At the end of their second session, she decided to leave the dictionary with him so he could practice on his own. It was on the third day that Ruby had decided that she would ask Ashen to teach her his forgotten language. There wasn't much for her to teach him. All it really came down to for him was to memorize the spelling of words. She could help explain certain things that he probably never had encountered, but not much else. Ruby couldn't help but groan out loud when she remembered that school would be starting for her in a few weeks. Why couldn't summer be longer? She came to a surprise stop when Ashen didn't appear in his usual spot. There were 2 books sitting there instead. One was the dictionary she gave him, while the other was an unfamiliar, dusty-looking, leather-bound tome. Her curiosity drove her to take a peek inside. To her lack of surprise, she was unable to read anything that was written inside. Ruby was surprised to notice that certain letters were the same while the majority looked completely foreign. The longer she stared at the pages, the more she couldn't help but feel off. There was something about the characters that were giving her a tingling feeling. They felt special, somehow. Ruby shook her head before closing the book. She glanced around but couldn't find any trace of Ashen, which begged the question, where did he go? She doubted that he left the book sitting out here all night, so he must have been here until recently. As if to answer her question, a howl pierced the silence around her. It was joined by a few more. There was no mistaking the howl of a Beowulf as Ruby took an unconscious step back away from the noise. The howling was quickly answered with an explosion. It was soon followed by a few more, black smoke snaking away above the treeline. Ruby swallowed as butterflies danced in her stomach. There was no doubt in her mind that Ashen was the one currently fighting that grim pack. The smart choice would be for her to wait here until he finished. The safest choice would be for her to return home. Despite how obvious it was what her dad would have her do, she really wanted to see him fight. She was not running toward danger. This was simply a fast and cautious jog. Ruby darted between the trees with her head on a swivel. The last thing she wanted was to run into a grim by mistake. As the sounds of battle grew louder, Ruby slowed her pace. It proved fortunate as an Ursa plowed through the trees next to her, causing her to jump in fright. Its body was folded over in half from the force as black wisps of smoke poured from its body. Ruby peeked her head out and her eyes widened in amazement. Standing in the middle of this newly formed clearing was Ashen. She could still make out flickering flames licking the scorched ground at various spots. There were charred trees that had been cut down and the occasional stump. At least a dozen grim corpses were scattered around in various states of dismemberment. The remaining grim, a few remaining Beowulfs, circled around Ashen. Despite being surrounded, he stood tall in the midst of the carnage. Shield in one hand, sword in the other, and cape billowing out behind him. Ruby's breath escaped her as she stared in awe. No book or movie will ever be able to capture the sheer presence of this moment. She watched as the grim rushed Ashen in a last-ditch effort to overwhelm him with their remaining numbers. Ruby gasped as a Beowulf lunged at him. Ashen sidestepped it as his sword struck out, splitting the beast into 2. Another lashed out at him with claws extended. He simply raised his shield to block the blow. She could hear the sound of claws and bones shattering as the Beowulf's arm impacted against the shield. Ashen's arm, however, did not budge a single inch. The grim stumbled back, howling in pain, when its screams were abruptly cut off as Ashen decapitated it. The rest of the fight carried on with much of the same brutality. Any grim that dared approach him were cut down with no hesitation or remorse. At one point he intercepted a Beowulf's jaws with his forearm. Ruby could see its teeth shatter on Ashen's armor. He retaliated with his shield, swinging it down and caving the creature's skull in. She squealed in excitement. Watching Ashen reminded her of a movie she saw not too long ago. There was a scene where the hero and his companions had to face off against a giant of a man. Even against their combined might, the giant was able to shrug off their blows and strike back twice as hard. It felt like a reenactment of the same scene, only this time the positions were reversed. Unfortunately for the Grim, it did not look like they would receive any last-minute support to turn the tide. Ashen had already cut down half of the remaining Grim and he did not show any signs of tiring. She had yet to see him take more than a single swing to cut down any of the Grim. It was when Ashen was dealing with the last few beowulfs that Ruby noticed a black ball spinning on the ground and approaching from the trees behind him. She gasped. The last-minute support. Ruby stepped out from the tree she was hiding behind to warn him. "Look out!" she shouted just as Ashen slew the last Beowulf. He turned toward her in surprise, leaving his back exposed. Realizing his mistake, Ashen planted a foot forward, bracing himself. There was a loud crash as the sphere impacted, the noise punctuated by a piercing squeal. Despite the force of the impact, Ashen was able to keep his footing. As far as Ruby could tell, it barely budged him. Now that the sphere had stopped moving, she could see that it was a boar-like grim. Its tusks and small amount of bone plating lay shattered around its dissolving corpse. Her dad had mentioned this type of grim before, but for the life of her, she could not remember its name. "Ruby." She jumped when she heard Ashen address her. She didn't need to see his face to know that he was not happy to see her here. The way he slammed his sword back into its sheath erased any doubt that he wasn't. "What are you doing here?" Ruby gulped. She recognized the tone he had used. It was the same tone her dad used when he caught her doing something she wasn't supposed to, like taking extra cookies from the cookie jar. I heard all the noise and wanted to see what was going on." She shifted nervously as he approached. Ashen glanced at the bowled-over trees behind her. "So, you thought to endanger yourself again?" he said. She winced in response. "You're fortunate I did not hit you when I threw that beast your way." Ruby chuckled nervously as she rubbed the back of her head. "But you didn't? And you killed all of the Grimm, so it's all fine now." Ashen sighed in frustration. "That is no excuse for your actions. Do so again and I will consider our relationship over. Have I made myself clear?" Ruby nodded. Ashen waved her along as walked past her. "Good. Let us return, lest we attract more of these creatures." Despite her scolding, Ruby struggled to keep the spring out of her step. Just thinking about the fight made her want to squeal in excitement. She thought her uncle was strong, but after seeing Ashen fight, she was now pretty sure that Ashen was the stronger one. The way that he wouldn't be budged even by that boar-like Grimm, got to ask Dad what the name for them was again, was more amazing and cooler than Uncle Crow even on his best day. Once more the two took their usual seats next to each other. Ashen picked up a black feather that Ruby had missed the first time around. It was only when Ashen pulled out a small bottle filled with what looked like ink that she realized what it was for. She didn't think anyone still used feathers, right? Badlands. How could she have forgotten to leave the pen with him? Ruby barely managed to restrain herself from face-palming as she mentally groaned. "Before we begin, there is something I need to bring to your attention," Ashen spoke up. "What is it?" she asked. From his tone it sounded important. "Your uncle, he is still searching for me," he responded. "If possible, I would like you to speak with him and ask him to cease his attempts." "Why?" Ruby was confused. Was this why Uncle Crow was still against all of this? "Is there a reason why you can't talk to him like you did with my dad?" "It is not my place to say what it is that he does, just know that I am familiar with his line of work. It is the kind that can get me involved in a mess of things that I would rather avoid. I have also overheard him using that scroll of his to speak to the one that employs him. They are interested in my secrets and I need not tell you how I feel about divulging any of them." She nodded. She had not forgotten her promise to him. "You're not going to fight him, are you?" Ruby asked hesitantly. "Only if he attacks me. I would rather it does not come to that, and it is why I am asking you to speak with him. Should things continue as is, we may eventually come to blows, and I cannot be held responsible for the outcome." "I will." Ruby hesitated before asking. "Can you promise that you won't start a fight with him? I know that he can be very difficult to get along with. My dad says so all the time." Ashen chuckled. "Very well. I swear on my name that even should your uncle draw his blade against me, as long as he does not strike me, I will not engage him in combat." "Thank you." Ruby gave him the most sincere smile she could muster. Ashen ruffled her hair and Ruby couldn't help but bask in the heat that radiated from it as it soaked into her skull. It was something that she had become more aware of over her last few encounters with him. Despite the fact that he was completely covered in armor, she was able to feel a warmth, she did not know how else to describe it, emanating through his armor. It was unlike anything she had ever felt and made her feel complete. The sensation was so similar to what she felt that night weeks ago when she woke up. The only missing facet was that feeling of motherly love that enveloped her at the beginning. She could feel the warmth erase any tiredness from her body wherever it seeped through and left her feeling refreshed and relaxed. Her aura tingled in a way she could only describe as good. While Ruby wished she could feel that same sensation that was so similar to one of her mother's hugs, she was happy with this. She mewed in disappointment when she felt Ashen pull his hand away. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Ruby jumped in surprise at the sound of his voice and blinked rapidly. She hadn't even realized that she had closed her eyes. "You were smiling. Is there something you want to tell me?" Ashen teased. Ruby flushed a deep scarlet in embarrassment as she babbled gibberish in an attempt to come up with an excuse. Ashen chuckled as he handed her the dictionary, giving her an escape from her predicament. "Are you ready to continue our lessons?" Ruby nodded vigorously in response as she hid her still flushed cheeks behind her book. He opened up the journal he had been writing in previously before the Grimm had interrupted. "Good. There were a few words that I had come across that caught my interest, and I was hoping you could better explain to me what they are. Let us with this one. Electricity, if I am pronouncing it correctly. What is it exactly?" "Oh, that's a bit tricky to explain," Ruby responded. She rocked her head back and forth as she tried to come up with a good description for him. "So, basically," they continued like that for the next hour or so. Ruby did her best to answer any of his questions and describe things to the best of her ability. Unfortunately, there were some words that she was absolutely clueless about herself. He was not put off by her lack of knowledge on more advanced things, but it still stung her pride. If only she were older and knew more. One thing she did realize while speaking with him was how much she took her current life for granted. It was only through her conversations with him that she was truly beginning to understand just how far behind the Badlands were when it came to technology. She couldn't imagine life without electricity, TV, video games, or cookies. He barely seemed to know what dust was. Admittedly, she barely did herself, but still, dust was one of the strongest weapons that a huntsman could wield against the Grimm. The fact that he went most of his life barely relying on it said a lot about how strong he was. No doubt, what she saw earlier was a fraction of his full strength. Eventually, their conversation trailed off until there was only the scratching of Ashen's quill in his journal. Ruby couldn't help but stare as he wrote. Under every sentence he wrote down so far was a copy rewritten in his native language. As much as she wanted to ask him about it, she did not want to interrupt him. "Something on your mind?" Ruby jumped with a small eep. He really had to stop scaring her like that. Ashen chuckled. "You look like you want to ask something. Well, go ahead. I do not mind." "Oh, okay. I was wondering if you would teach me how to write in your language." "Oh, what brought this on?" he asked with a noticeable tone of curiosity. "I remembered that you said that your language is mostly forgotten, and I thought to myself that if I learn it then it will be less forgotten." Then, Ruby trailed off as she fidgeted nervously in place. "Go on, do not be shy. I am not here to judge you." "I feel funny when I look at it," Ruby admitted. Ashen straightened up. "Can you explain that for me?" he asked. "I'm not sure how. When I took a peek in your journal earlier, I felt funny. It doesn't feel bad, but I can't say that it's good either." "It feels right," Ashen supplied. Ruby nodded. "Yeah. Why though?" Ashen paused to consider the question. He knew from his discussions with Ruby that most, if not all knowledge predating the Age of Dark, was lost. It was to be expected, of course, but even through the many cycles, the fall of kingdoms and the loss of knowledge with them, there have always been whispers that survived it all and continued to be passed down through the ages. His next question would confirm, to a degree, if any knowledge had survived to this age. Ashen found that a part of himself did not want to know. "What do you know of the gods?" Ruby blinked in surprise at the perceived change in topic. "Do you mean the two brothers? My mom told me the story once, but I don't really remember it." "Is the story important?" Ashen took a moment to absorb the information before continuing. "Have you ever heard the tale of Lord Gwyn?" "Who?" He leaned back and took a deep breath. If the tales of the gods did not endure, what chance was there for anything else? Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Ruby glancing around nervously, no doubt worried that she had upset him somehow. "My village practiced a more obscure religion," Ashen said as he flipped to earlier pages in his journal before handing it to Ruby. "It taught that it was the gods who gifted us humans with language. They shared with us their sacred language to aid and raise us, and we in turn had praised and revered them." Ruby stared at the pages in front of her, a faint glimmer in her silver eyes as she soaked in the ancient and sacred writings of Einar Londo. "Do you feel it?" Ruby nodded. "There is power in those words. You may not understand a single word that is written, but regardless, you can feel the divine energy that resides in those characters." Ashen drew another coin from one of his pouches. Unlike the one he gave her, this one was made of silver. He flipped it over and set it on the journal. Just like the one he gave her, there was writing imprinted on the back. Ruby glanced between the coin and the writings in the journal as she realized that the characters were the same. It was common practice where I am from to engrave words of prayer on the back of our currency. Small words of faith to bolster our spirit. This way we would always carry a piece of the God's blessings with us. It's the same, Ruby commented as she picked up the coin and held it up in the air. I didn't really pay attention before, but I feel the same as when I looked at the one you gave me. It's weaker than the book, but I can still feel something. Interesting, Ashen muttered. It seems that there may be more to you than what appears at first glance. What do you mean? She asked as she returned his coin. Only those of devout faith can sense the strength in the small phrases, while most others are unable to sense anything, he explained. For the few exceptions who do, it is weak enough that it can be mistakenly passed off as some other sensation. But what does that mean for me? I could not tell you, Ashen admitted. It could simply be that the gods favor you, or it could be something unique to yourself. In the end, do not concern yourself over old faiths or all, but gone now, so it is unlikely you will ever encounter these sensations outside of interactions with me. Ruby frowned as she crossed her arms. She hated it when he brushed away his losses like they were nothing. It's okay to be sad. Are you sure you want to learn the sacred text? He asked, cutting into her thoughts. I do not believe they will serve you in any purpose, and you have already spent quite a bit of time here helping me. She nodded. I do. Don't you want to protect it so it doesn't end up lost forever? If you teach me, then you can rest easy because no matter what happens, you'll know at least one person hasn't forgotten it. Though she could not see it, Ashen was smiling at her beneath his helm. You never cease to amaze me with how compassionate you are. He glanced upwards. It is getting late. Any lessons will have to wait until another day. Ruby glanced up as well and saw that the sky had taken on a golden hue. Further confirmation from her scroll told her that it was late afternoon. She really needed to get home. Any later and she wouldn't hear the end of it from her dad. Ruby huffed in annoyance as she handed back his journal. The days were too short. I guess I'll come back tomorrow, she said as she rose from her seat, dusting her skirt off. Are you sure that will be okay? Ashen asked. Yeah, it's no problem. My dad is fine. Ashen raised a hand, cutting Ruby off. I was not referring to your father, he elaborated. Recently, I have been contemplating the frequency that you have been visiting me, and it has me growing concerned. About what? Ruby panicked. Did I do something wrong? Is it about today? I promise that I won't. Ashen stood up and placed his hands on her shoulders. Calm yourself. I am simply worried that you are neglecting your family to spend time with me. Surely you cannot be coming here every day like this. Do you not have chores or other duties you must help your family with? Well, yeah, but I'll finish most of it before I come to see you. Besides, I'm still on break, so I don't have to worry about homework. And what about your family? Have you not been sacrificing time that you could have been spending with them? I spend plenty of time with them. Ruby trailed off as she remembered Uncle Crow's offer to take her and Yang to the town's arcade today. He would be leaving soon on some important mission, so they wouldn't hear from him for days, maybe even weeks. She hadn't even thought of that as she turned him down and walked out the door. Oh, now you see. As much as I enjoy the time we spend together, you have your own life to live away from me. Do not sacrifice it on my behalf. But what about? You said. Ruby frowned as she gazed up at him. Ashen cupped her cheek. Do not concern yourself with what I said about our arrangement. I told that I would give you ample warning before it ends. He chuckled. I also do not believe that your life is so cheap that it is only worth a few days of companionship, is it? Ruby couldn't help a small giggle before she shook her head. No. Then that's that then, he said as he stepped back. Go home and live your life. I have already lived mine, so there is not much else you can do for me. I will remain here and watch over the forgotten graves. Your life does not revolve around me, so do not let this old man steal away time that could be better spent on yourself. Okay. Ruby fidgeted nervously. If there's nothing planned and I'm free, would it be okay for me to come by tomorrow? If you are free, then come. If not, then come another day. Ashen returned to his seat. It is as simple as that. So, I guess I will see you soon then? I suppose you will. Oh, and do not forget to speak with your uncle. I won't. Ruby gave him a smile that felt crafted from the sun's rays. You take care of yourself until I get back. Ashen chuckled. I will. May the fire guide you, Ruby Rose. Ruby was momentarily taken aback by the phrase, but she shook it off with a wave and began her trek back home. Ashen watched her until she was out of sight. He turned his gaze toward the unlit bonfire before him. The coiled sword was resting inside the shrine and he contemplated retrieving it. In the end he decided against it. With the first flame burning inside him, it would still work regardless of the fact that the age was long gone. He would be the only undead bonded to it. The last undead to be bonded to a bonfire. Funny how he didn't feel anything at the thought. Ashen turned his attention to the forest. Before he knew it, he had drawn his sword and was marching out once more. It would be best to ensure that no other packs were drawing near the shrine. The hunt would serve as a nice distraction. No need to ponder about the past and what had been lost with it. An undead simply pressed on. After all, what else could an undead do? Chapter 8. The days go by but the sun still shines. Ashen had not expected this encounter. He had been walking through the forest, dispatching any grim he had come across, when he stumbled upon this group in the forest with him. From the hill he was standing on, he had a clear view of the area below. There were a dozen individuals milling about. It was fortunate that he had taken to constantly wearing the obscuring ring again, as he noticed more and more incursions into the forest by similar groups of people. It allowed him to observe, with none of them being any the wiser. He spotted Ruby's father, Ty, amongst the 3 adults gathered. The rest were children, or rather, they were young men and women leaving childhood and taking their first steps into adulthood. From what he could tell, he guessed that they had to be at least twice Ruby's age, if not a little more. It was hard to tell since he only had Ruby as a point of reference. From her attitude every time he brought it up, she was clearly a bit too small for her size. Just you wait. I'm going to have a big growth spurt and be taller than you. I just have to drink plenty of milk. Ashen couldn't keep a smile from his face. While his time with Ruby would not last forever, he would savor what he had now. It has been far too long since he interacted with someone who treated him as a person and not an undead. Even among others like him, he always had to keep a hand on his sword. No undead was foolish enough to believe that the one next to them was immune to hollowing. His attention was drawn back to the clearing in front of him as another adult came running in from the trees and joined the others. His sword was drawn and stained with the evaporating ichor of the Grim. Ashen watched as the students, which he had now deduced they were, pair off with an instructor. Some of them shifted their weapons into new shapes. Firearms, he believed they were called as a whole. He wanted to say that the sight of such weaponry surprised him, but it didn't. After being on the receiving end of Gale's repeating crossbow, he would have been surprised if humanity never built upon such a concept. Use every tool at your disposal, every ounce of knowledge in your head. Do everything in your power to not only level the playing field, but to destabilize it in your favor. There are no concepts as fair or right in battle, while honor is only useful for the dead. Victory is all that matters. Do not suffer the taste of defeat if you can avoid it. Victory by any means is still victory. It seemed that some ideologies were not limited to Karthus. A small pack of Beowulfs ran out from the tree line. They skidded to a stop at the sight of so many individuals waiting for them. The pack, or what was left of it, was only half a dozen strong. Ashen observed as the student pairings spread out to put distance between each other. After a bit of effort and the culling of 2 more Grim, the instructors managed to corral the beasts into positions between them and their students. It was obvious that from this point on, it would be up to the students to defeat the survivors. What followed next was not something he would dare to ever call a fight. Ashen could tell from their movements alone that they were all very inexperienced, though this may not have been the first time any of them had fought a Grim. They acted overly safe, keeping the distance between them wider than what was necessary, and were quick to frighten whenever the Grim's hostility was shifted their way. Ashen's attention was drawn to the pair closest to him, causing him to frown in displeasure. A boy and a girl, each armed with a polearm. The girl a spear and the boy a poleaxe. From their stances alone, he could tell that these 2 would be the most troublesome. His opinion of them was made worse by the size of the Grim they were facing. It was the smallest of the pack, a laughable threat when compared to the others. The boy bled arrogance with his nonchalant stance and perpetual sneer on his face as looked down on the creature before him. If his attitude was not fixed soon, then he would become a danger to others. That is, if he didn't get himself killed first. The girl, on the other hand, trembled like a rabbit as she struggled to maintain a firm grip on her weapon. She held her spear out in front of herself, treating it more like a stick than the weapon it really was. The few strikes she attempted, lacking strength and conviction, were easily brushed aside or ignored. The fact that both were still allowed on the field was disgraceful. The girl should have already been pulled from the field. She was clearly showing a lack of aptitude for combat, and it would be best if she was sent off to choose another path in life before she got herself killed. The arrogant prick stood to the side and watched as the girl struggled with the small Beowulf. It seemed that some aspects of humanity never changed, as there was always one such individual among potential warriors. Ashen found such individuals difficult to deal with. If they could not be broken in, their pride and arrogance beaten out of them, then they should be removed as soon as possible. Best to nip the bud early before it blossomed into something that at best caused their early death, and possibly others through their own hubris, while at worst, allowed such men to eventually become some of the most vicious tyrants or fail and turn into violent bandits or marauders. Some scolding from the instructor overseeing them finally prompted the boy into aiding his comrade. With an annoyed scoff, the boy approached the distracted Beowulf from behind as it tried to wrestle the girl's spear away with its jaws. With a single swing, he severed its hind legs, freeing the girl from her tug-of-war and causing her to fall on her behind. Instead of ending the beast then and there, he chose to mock the beast and prod at it. What a surprise. The brat is also a sadist. Before his instructor could berate him any further, his attention was drawn along with the other teachers to the stray Grimm that had wandered into the clearing. Ashen unhooked the black bow he had brought with him as the instructors moved to engage. It was fortunate that he brought a bow with him today, because he had a gut feeling that something was about to go wrong. As his eyes scanned the tree line, he saw it. A Beowulf was circling around the children. It went unnoticed by everyone else and positioned itself in the line of sight of its dying kin, right behind the two children he had been observing. Its size was a bit larger than average, no doubt the future alpha to emerge from its pack. The squabbling children were oblivious to whatever silent conversation had passed between the two. The Beowulf on the ground began growling and whining, dragging the children's attention back to it. The boy brushed off his teammate and moved to end the creature. He was taken by surprise when the Beowulf used the last of its strength to lunge at him. While he managed to block the bite aimed for his head with the shaft of his poleaxe, it left him pinned and vulnerable as he found himself supporting the dying Grimm's weight. The girl screamed a warning as the other rushed him from behind. Even from a distance, Ashen could see the fear on the boy's face. In an instant, he notched and released 3 arrows at the running Grimm. All 3 found their mark, with the first piercing its thigh, the second going into the side of its rib cage, and the third puncturing the side of its throat. The force of the impacts were enough to stumble the beast, causing it to crash into the ground. It bought enough time for the boy to throw and finish off the Grimm, pinning him. Just as he turned his attention to his ambusher, one of the instructors had reached them and jumped on it. With a single blow, he caved its skull in with a warhammer, killing it instantly. As soon as he confirmed that the threat was eliminated and that there were no others, he immediately began tearing into the 2 children. He berated the boy for his arrogance and overconfidence that left him exposed before he moved on to the girl who had stood off to the side, paralyzed in fear, unable to help him. Unfortunately, as much as Ashen wanted to stay, watch and enjoy the outcome, he could see Ty heading his way. While his ring could hide his body, it didn't hide the arrows once they were freed, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out what direction they came from. It was time for him to go. Hopefully there would not be a second incident, because he wouldn't be nearby to step in again. The walk back was uneventful, and Ashen found himself a little disappointed. He had set out today to hunt some of the avian Grimm, but unfortunately, his search was fruitless before he was sidetracked. As he neared the shrine, he encountered a Beowulf stalking towards the clearing. It didn't hear him approach until he ran his blade through its back. The Grimm died with a loud whine, its body beginning to dissolve. No matter how many times he saw it, Ashen would admit that he never ceased to be fascinated by the process. If he was any matter, he would attempt to study the creatures, but he knew better. He had seen enough times of what happens when a man tampers with secrets best left buried. When Ashen stepped into the clearing, he was unsurprised to find Ruby waiting for him. She was gazing in his direction with searching eyes. He didn't fail to notice how she had her arms wrapped around herself, nor did he miss Zvi, who had planted himself in front of her, ears and body alert, and ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Zvi may be small and oddly shaped, but he had more courage than most men. The one time a Grimm, an Ursa Major, Ruby called it, had wandered into the clearing, Zvi was more than ready to charge the beast despite the fact that he was greatly outsized. That alone was enough to earn his respect for the small dog. Ruby didn't even flinch as Ashen stepped close enough for the ring's effect to fail. "I thought I heard you," she commented as Zvi ran around his feet in excitement. "Good to see you too, Ruby," Ashen greeted as he took a seat next to Ruby. "Do you remember what I said about you choosing to wait for me here?" Ruby winced before she turned away. "Ruby," she sighed, turning back to face him. "To pay attention to my surroundings because the Grimm sometimes wander over here, so I need to be alert and ready to escape, because you won't always be nearby to save me if I don't." After a pause, she tacked on, I was also sulking. And why is that bad? When Ruby shot him a look, he realized that she had misunderstood him. He genuinely wanted to know why she thought he would be upset with her for sulking. Because negative emotions draw the grim. This was news to him. While he could pass off most of his ignorance as the result of being from the Badlands as she called them, he knew that there was some knowledge of the world that he should know. He played it off when he could, and Ruby, thankfully, never pressed him on it. The fact that these grim could hunt by human emotions was a bit surprising, but not as big as it should have been. Animals could sense emotions to a degree, so this just sounded like a much stronger version of that. Throw in the small tinge of the abyss that each carried, and then it made sense as to why so few kingdoms existed. The ravenous hunger of the abyss and the ability to sense humans beyond their normal senses. If they truly were hunting humanity like Ruby said, then they were a foe humanity couldn't hide from and would always know where to seek them out. No wonder life outside the kingdom's walls is considered rare and fickle. Ashen shook his head. He was letting himself get distracted by his thoughts. Sorry? I was thinking about something. About what? For one, what can happen to someone so naturally exuberant that it can bring their mood so low? I believe this is the first time I have ever seen you come here in such a state. Did something happen? Ruby crossed her arms as she pouted. I had a bad day at school, she muttered. She reached down to pluck Zwei from the ground before settling him in her lap. Ah yes. I remember you mentioning that you started a week ago. Ruby blinked at him owlishly. An odd reaction because he was certain that he didn't say anything deserving of such. She shook her head before asking, Are my eyes weird? Ashen was taken aback by the question. What brought this on? At school today, one of my classmates was asking me if something was wrong with my eyes, because they had never seen someone with silver eyes before. I know that he wasn't trying to be mean, but some of the others. Let me guess, they were bored and desired entertainment, so they decided to alleviate their boredom at your expense, hence why you are in such a low mood today. Ruby took a moment to process what he said. Yeah, right? She gave him a self-satisfied smile, confident that she learned a new word. Ashen couldn't keep the smile off his face. It was fun to watch Ruby try to comprehend him when he used words that she did not know. That little sense of satisfaction he felt each time she learned a little more. He wondered if his first sorcery teacher, Ambriel, felt like this. You never really understood how little you knew until you met someone who knew so much more. So, Ruby drawled, you didn't answer my question, are my eyes weird? You had to have met other people with eyes like mine. I mean, my mom also had silver eyes. Ashen hummed in thought. Unfortunately, I do not believe I have ever encountered anyone with eyes like yours. It was the truth. Throughout the thousands of years he lived, he had never encountered anyone with silver eyes, at least as far as he could remember. So I guess I really am weird. Ruby slumped forward dejectedly. Zwei reached up to nuzzle and lick her. Why should their opinion matter to you? Let me share this piece of wisdom that I learned from my long life. People will use any excuse to divide themselves to make themselves feel superior to others. Be it kingdom, race, religion, and all sorts of trivial things, but it all means nothing in the end. We are all people. We live together, fight together, and we will die together. Do not let the words of some miscreants affect you so. Be proud of who you are. I am certain your father would say the same. Thanks. She gave him a bright and sunny smile, her earlier mood vanquished. He noticed how beautifully her silver eyes shined. Behind those eyes were the spark of a single tiny ember, and he couldn't help but think, what if they had some blue mixed in? His stomach churned at the thought. While he had never seen anyone with silver eyes before, he was now forming a speculation as to why. With the age of fire long past, there should not be any ramifications if his thoughts were true, but a small part of him couldn't help but worry. You're welcome. Time for a change in topic. How is your writing coming along? Good. But I have some more questions. Ruby passed him Zwei before picking up her notebook. To Ashen's amusement, Zwei curled up in his lap as he prepared to take a nap. As much he acted like an ordinary dog, Ashen knew better. Zwei possessed an intelligence that he had only ever seen in the mighty great wolves. He spent the remainder of his time with Ruby, trying to explain the complex nuances that heavily permeated the Holy Script. When they were finished and Ruby returned home, Ashen decided to go out hunting once more. It would serve as a good distraction from his thoughts. Ruby sat at her desk as she attempted to do her homework. Attempt being the key word. For the upteenth time she sighed as she found herself unable to focus on the work in front of her. She laid her head on her desk as she rolled her pencil back and forth. It was impossible for her to not think about what he said. He said that she started school a week ago. It's been nearly a month since she started. It was something that she had noticed as she spent more time with him. Ashen didn't have a sense of time. He would talk about yesterday and not realize that yesterday was in fact days ago. She was still worried about him eventually cutting himself off from her, but now it didn't seem as big of a threat as she once thought. She asked her dad about it, but it was Uncle Crow who best explained what was probably wrong. Ruby felt glum as she thought on what Ashen must have been through to make him that way. A person able to lose track of time because he no longer cared what day it was, to have no plans for a tomorrow he never expected to live to see. What did it feel like to be forever trapped in a moment that lasted forever? You always felt alone. She knew that he lost his friends and family, but how many times did he go through that? How many times did he find a new family, make new friends, only to lose them again? Ruby couldn't imagine what that must have been like. Her family has been through it once already and it was almost enough to break them. How did Ashen endure it? It wasn't fair. Ashen was probably the strongest person she knew, or at the very least second to Uncle Crow. She had seen him fight and not once did he ever seem afraid. In fact, at times, it seemed to be a chore for him. The one time she asked him how he was able to face the Grimm so easily, he responded, "I've fought bigger and scarier monsters." Ironically, that would also be the day where she saw him crush the head of an Ursa Major in a single blow with his fist. He's so powerful that he can easily overwhelm the strongest of the Grimm that she's seen. And yet, with all that strength, it wasn't enough to protect the things he cared about. Ashen was her hero. He saved her life, but lately she has started to wonder if she was the only person he had ever saved. He clutched his secrets tightly to himself, and the few that she had been able to pry away or he let slip painted a harsh picture that she did not want to look at. The more she learned, the more she realized how broken he was, to the point that she found herself questioning at times if he could ever be fixed. Ashen hid it well, but she knew better. No one could bottle things up forever. Her dad would still stay up some nights drinking, and Yang would occasionally cry in her sleep. What did Ashen do when he was alone? How did he handle his griefs? The mountain of issues he had just kept growing. But she would not give up. Heroes are not supposed to be abandoned or forgotten. She wasn't sure how much she could do, but if she could put a small part of him back together, then maybe that would be enough. Enough to start a change that would fix him completely. One thing was for sure, she had to stop brooding over what has already happened and focus on what she could do moving forward. I just have to keep going one step at a time. Ruby lifted her head and stretched her arms. Fortunately, she had time to work on Ashen's problems, but her homework was due tomorrow. When she focused back on the page in front of her, she groaned. She had been doing her homework in the sacred script, so now she was going to have to restart from scratch. Thankfully, she wasn't that far along. Instead of throwing the page away, she tore it out and stuck it inside another notebook that she kept filled with her practice writings. The sacred script, as Ashen called it, was a lot more complex than she expected. There was a lot of, what was it called again? Oh yeah, nuance. There were a lot of nuances that had to be considered when using it. The characters or letters changed shape and or meaning depending on your relationship with the person you're writing to, your position of power compared to theirs, if they were a god, etc. The god part she found funny. But to be fair, this is a religious form of writing. She showed it off to the rest of her family, but no one else felt the same tingling feeling that she had. Yang thought it looked like a bunch of silly scribbles, while her dad said it looked interesting, though he commented that he had never seen anything like it before. When she showed it to Uncle Crow that day he stopped by, he took a picture. He said he would let her know if he came across anything similar when he was out in the field. To be fair to everyone else, she couldn't feel as strong a sensation compared to what she felt from Ashen's journal or the coin he gave her. Thinking about the coin, Ruby retrieved it from one of her drawers. She gazed at the words etched on the backside, words she could now read, albeit with some difficulty. Through the grace of the gods the flame gave us life. By their love we are blessed with light. May the flame guide your way. A small tingle went through her that brought a smile to her face. Despite all her frustrations with the sacred script, she really enjoyed using it. It felt like a secret code that only she and Ashen knew. As Ruby returned her coin to its hiding place inside her drawer, her eyes caught on the new book she bought the other day. Its bright green cover called out to her. It has been a while since she last checked how Ashen was coming along with his reading. Ruby's cheeks flushed red with embarrassment as the idea crept into her head. There was no way she could ask that of him. She shook her head furiously. Nope, nah. It was a bad idea. Okay, maybe not a bad idea, but it would be embarrassing. Especially when she considered what the book was about. The book was staying here and that was final. Ruby hesitated as she approached her usual meeting place with Ashen. It looked empty now, but she knew better than to take it at first glance. In the end, she did bring the book with her, but now she was starting to have second thoughts. It didn't help when Young laughed when she saw what she was bringing. After taking a deep breath, she stepped forward into what she knew was inside the range of Ashen's magic. To her non-surprise, Ashen was sitting on the log waiting for her. But what was surprising was that he wasn't paying any attention to her. In his hands was a palm-sized golden disc. When she stepped closer, she was able to see that it was a medallion with a picture of the sun on it. The small drawing of a face in the center of the sun almost made her laugh. Despite the fact that she was now standing next to him, he did not react to her presence. She knew he could get distracted and lost in his thoughts at times, but this was a first. Ashen. Ashen jerked in surprise before his head snapped towards her. Ruby? He shook his head. Forgive me. I did not notice your arrival. Oh, it's all right. What do you have there? To Ruby's surprise, he covered the medallion, clasping it between both hands. It was something obviously precious to him. Now she felt bad for asking. It felt like she was invading his privacy. It is something very precious to me. I do not want to discuss it. I am sorry if I cannot sate your curiosity. Oh, it's okay, Ruby responded as she waved a hand back and forth. I don't mind. You don't have to tell me about it if you don't want to. Ashen nodded in thanks before he placed the medallion inside a small box beside him. When he turned his attention back to her, he tilted his head. What are you hiding behind your back? Ruby jumped and fidgeted in place. Oh, it's been a while since we checked on how your reading has come along, so. You brought a book for me to practice with, Ashen finished for her. Yeah. Ruby didn't need to see his face to know he raised a brow at her hesitation. She found she was getting better at reading him despite all his armor. Didn't do anything to help with the embarrassed blush on her face. I was thinking that maybe you could read this one to me. I'll correct any mistakes you make. Can I see the book? Ashen said as he extended his hand toward her. She hesitated before handing the book over. Now the cover was exposed for the world to see. On it, standing out against its green background, was a stylized drawing in gold of a knight facing off against a dragon. The Tale of Lancelot and the Dragon of Mt. Glen, Ashen read aloud. You want me to read you a story? He asked, obviously amused by her request. You don't have to read it if you don't want to, Ruby rushed out, face glowing in embarrassment. He chuckled. It is fine. I do not mind indulging you with this request. Consider this repayment for the help you have given me. He motioned for her to take a seat next to him. I will admit to being a bit surprised. A story about a knight and a dragon. I wonder what brought this on. Ruby buried her face in her hands. She could hear the smirk in his voice. Now let us begin. Before the Kingdom of Vale was founded in the heart of Vale, it existed as a series of feudal settlements run by lords and protected by their brave knights. The first to rise from this class of brave warriors into legend, the one who would be credited for clearing the way for the founding of the city of Vale and considered one of the greatest of knights was Sir Lancelot the Brave. Like all great heroes, he rose from humble origins. Our tale begins in a small settlement on the edge of Vale's territory. Ruby found herself enraptured as Ashen read to her. She slowly scooted closer before eventually leaning her head on his arm where she could feel that familiar warmth seeping into her. There was a small, missable pause in his reading, but other than that he didn't say anything against it. Her eyelids were getting heavy and she knew that if she wasn't careful she would fall asleep. Little bonding moments like this brought people together. It's what her parents taught her. Hopefully one day soon he wouldn't feel like he had to keep hiding behind his helmet. Until then she was going to enjoy this moment and the story that came with it. Chapter 9, Glimpse of Sunlight. Ruby was giddy as she skipped along on her way to meet with Ashen. Why was she so happy? Yesterday was her birthday, which made her 8 years old, and she had grown a centimeter taller. Her dad threw her a small party to celebrate and Uncle Crow even managed to make it. Thankfully he didn't pass out in the cake like last year. It was a great day and she got presents from everyone. Everyone, that is, except for one person. Maybe it was all the leftover sugar in her bloodstream from yesterday, but Ruby was feeling a bit bold today. She knew exactly what she was going to ask Ashen for. It's already been a year since they first met and yesterday was also their anniversary. Okay, maybe it wasn't exactly 1 year. Depending on what day she wanted to use, the day she fell or the day he made his promise to her, there was a difference of 1 or 2 months. She decided to use her birthday to mark the occasion since it would be easier to keep track of. The extra present she would get by doing so was a nice bonus and was in no way a factor in her decision. Ruby skipped most of the way to her meeting spot with Ashen. She didn't stop because she tried to skip down the ramp, tumbled and face planted. No one can prove that it happened. When she stepped inside of Ashen's magic, she found him waiting for her like usual. I am amazed that you can still be so exuberant after the tumble that you had. Ruby flinched in embarrassment. Do you mind telling me what has you in high spirits today? That's because today is a special day, she exclaimed. Well, actually it was yesterday, so we're a day late. But it doesn't make today any less special. Would you share with me what occasion that would be? Ruby giggled. It was our anniversary, silly. She did a quick twirl before pointing a finger at herself. It was also my birthday. Ashen leaned back in surprise. Has it truly been a year? Yep, she responded with a smile. You have not changed a bit. I've gotten taller. Ruby shouted indignantly with a pout. Ashen found her as threatening as a newborn pup. He was tempted to say his thoughts out loud to tease her, but decided not to at the last moment. To think a year has already passed. Time does know how to slip away from people. Yep, and since it was also my birthday, you owe me a present. Oh, Ashen asked, amused. Pray tell me what I could offer you. I do not have much of anything to give. Yeah, you do, she responded cheekily. Ashen raised a brow. I am not giving you any more gold. Not that. She shook her head. The thought had crossed her mind, but she would never admit to it. I want a story. A story? She nodded. Yep. And what story are you seeking from me? Here came the hard part that made Ruby hesitate. She didn't want to force Ashen to open up about his past, but after a year together, she still knew so little about him. All she had were little bits and pieces with no context for her to understand any of it. Uncle Crow said that sometimes to help someone, you needed to give them a little push. At least that's what he said giving someone a kick in the rear meant. She was pretty sure that Ashen wouldn't appreciate it if she kicked him. I want you to tell me about the gold medallion I've seen you with. The change was immediate. Ashen straightened up and the feeling of friendliness was gone. He was now guarded against her. Ruby had become adept at reading Ashen's mood that she could even guess his facial expressions thanks to all the time they spent together. Right now, she was prodding at something that she knew he held very dear to himself in the same way she held her cape. Unfortunately, if she didn't, then nothing would change and there would always be this distance between them. She just hoped that this didn't cost her their friendship. Why? A simple but very loaded question. Ashen's voice was devoid of his previous warmth. Ruby took a deep breath before she pressed forward. Why, you rarely told me anything about yourself. You always keep everything to yourself and that's not good for you. Don't you want to tell people about what you've been through? Share your stories so they aren't forgotten? I know I may not be the best person to talk to about the things you've been through, but I can at least listen. After all the time we spent together, I just want you to stop pushing me away. Even if it's only a little bit, I still want to help you. Don't push me away. Please? Rather than respond to her, Ashen turned away as he pondered what he wanted to do. An uncomfortable silence dragged out between the two. She waited and waited, but he still would not break the silence. Ruby's heart sank. She could feel the tears gathering in her eyes as she hung her head. It looked like she might never be able to break through to him. I'm sorry, she stuttered. Forget I ever asked. Oh. Can you be at the cliffs before sunrise? Ruby's head snapped up in surprise. Ashen was facing her once more and the guarded hunch of his shoulders was gone. He seemed more resigned and tired than anything else. I do owe you quite a bit for the company you have provided me. I have rescinded our original promise and yet, you still come to see me constantly. Even though all you can do most days is tell me about your day and watch the clouds with me. You still come just to keep me company. You are right, you have shared so much about yourself but I have not shared anything in return. Ashen sighed. For one like me, it is difficult to think about the past. To do so can break the mind, yet without it we lose what makes us human. The last part was mumbled so low Ruby almost missed it. Ashen retrieved the medallion from a small box he kept on him. It shined under the sun. It is not easy for me to explain the significance this has, not just to me but also what it stands for as a symbol. Okay, but why do we have to be at the cliff so early? You will learn the answer to that if you show up on time. As much as she hated the idea of walking up so early, she didn't want to waste the opportunity given to her. She would definitely need to set her alarm. I'll definitely be there, she stated. Note to self, look up what time is sunrise later. Know this, I do not bother much with the beasts on cliffs unless they come down here, he cautioned. You will need to be careful because I will not go into the forest looking for you if something happens. Ruby nodded. I'll be careful. Make sure you do. Now, Ashen cut himself off as he rose and drew his sword. Immediately after, the sounds of growls filled the clearing. A large pack of Grimm prowled into the clearing. It seems that we will have to continue our conversation tomorrow morning. He stepped in front of Ruby, breaking the Grimm's line of sight on her. Get going. Now. Ruby didn't need to be told twice. She turned tail and ran as fast as she could. It was one thing for her to stay and watch him deal with a stray Grimm or two, but against a pack she was nothing more than a liability. The last thing she wanted was to be a hindrance to him. Once she reached the top of the cliff, she couldn't help taking a peek to watch the action. Of course, she did the safe method of laying flat on her stomach before doing so. It was a large pack that was drawn to their location. There was a mix of Beowulfs and Ursai that had surrounded Ashen. If it was anyone else, she would have been concerned for their safety, but not Ashen. His sword was a streak of silver as he dispatched each of the Grimm that rushed him. Ruby couldn't suppress a squeal of excitement which was noticed by two of the closest Grimm. The two Beowulfs turned and made eye contact with her. That was her cue to leave. She ducked and fled with an eep. This was not the first time the Grimm had cut one of their meetings short, but that didn't make it any less annoying when they did. At least she managed to do what she wanted to. Tomorrow was going to be a big leap in progress and she couldn't wait. The following morning, Ruby was jolted awake by her alarm. To avoid waking her dad and sister, she used the alarm on her scroll instead of her clock and planted it under her pillow to muffle the noise. The good news was that it worked. The bad news was that having it right under her head made it still sound very loud to her. She jumped up in bed only to get tangled in her sheets and fall off. She hit the ground with a soft thud and a drawn-out, ow. If she wasn't awake before, she was now. With a groan, she picked herself up and got dressed. To her relief, it was still dark outside so her timing wasn't off. She left a note on the top of the stairs for her dad and sister. She would have left it on the table, but on the off chance her dad checked her room first, better to be safe than sorry. You didn't live with a very overprotective family without learning these things. Ruby shivered when she stepped out into the crisp night air. She tried walking down the trail to the cliffs, but instead found herself rooted in place. It was a cloudy night, which meant there was little moonlight to help navigate by. The shadows cast by the forest were larger and more menacing. It felt like she was walking into the belly of a giant monster. Ruby held herself tight as she had flashbacks to that fateful night. After that night, she had never gone out after dark again. Her dad and uncle always kept the nearby Grimm population low, but when was the last time they did so? She was tempted to make a break for it, but with how dark it was, what if she ran straight into a Grimm because she couldn't see? Each step she took felt like there were bricks tied to her feet. All she had to do was reach Ashen and everything would be okay. He stayed out here all the time, so if he could do that, then she could too. Slowly but surely she began what was suddenly a very long trek through the woods. Ashen knelt in front of Summer's gravestone. He admired the hand carving that was done on the stone. It was in no way the work of a master artisan, but it was still a masterpiece of its own. He could make out uneven lines and out-of-place grooves from a hand that struggled to stay steady. It was the work of a man with little to no skill who struggled to get it right the first time, because it meant that much to him. He reached out and brushed some dirt free from its surface. Once more he couldn't help but wonder just who Summer Rose was. While Ruby never hesitated to brag about her mother whenever she was brought up, there was only so much she could tell him. Ashen had seen Ty fight during some of the occasions he had spied on him as he chaperoned trainees in the forest. His style was simple and efficient. Ty never showed off or took unnecessary risks as he taught his students how to fight. From his style alone, Ashen could tell that he was a fairly grounded individual. He wondered what kind of fighter his wife was. Was Ty her grounding force or was she his? Or did he ground himself out of necessity after her passing in an effort to avoid leaving his children without any parents? So many questions that may never be answered. Summer Rose was another added to the list of names of warriors he heard of, but would unfortunately never meet. Ashen was pulled from his musings as he felt Ruby step into the outer range of his senses. A new sense he had discovered was this ability to sense life, or rather, the wisps of fire that composed life. It took longer than he cared to admit to realize that it wasn't his instinct that warned him to the presence of others. He had Ruby to thank for his discovery. She stood out to his senses like a single ember while others were pinpricks or wisps, like smoke from a freshly extinguished fire. Ashen rose to his feet and turned to face the forest. Ruby was making slow progress toward him. No doubt she was afraid. Despite what he told her yesterday, he had made sure to clear out any nearby Grimm. The last thing he wanted to do was to endanger her life. "I apologize for what I am about to put your daughter through," Ashen stated to the gravestone behind him. He picked up a fist-sized stone from a small pile he had gathered. Ashen felt that the best way for Ruby to understand what the Sunlight Covenant represented was for her to experience, at least to a small degree, what he felt when he first found his calling to the Warriors of Sunlight. So with unerring accuracy he threw the stone. The night air was filled with the sounds of insects and the occasional owl. Ruby tried to keep herself calm as she shuffled along. The last thing she wanted was to be a beacon of negativity and draw the Grimm to her. Luckily for her, everything was peaceful and it didn't seem like there were any Grimm nearby. Just as she was about to finally breathe easy, something plowed through the tree branches on her right. Ruby jumped in the air with a shriek. Her eyes darted around anxiously as her heartbeat started thundering in her ears. She was frozen in place as she was afraid to alert whatever it was to her presence. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic. She couldn't detect any movement. Just as she was about to slowly creep away, something shattered the branches above. Panic. With another scream she took off like a bullet. Her breathing became erratic as the path in front of her morphed into something more sinister. Shadows became claws that threatened to pluck her away, while the wind became a howl that buried itself in her ears. The branches shook violently above her, with some even snapping and falling behind her. Was it a Nevermore? Did she have a Nevermore chasing her? She needed to reach Ashen. He would protect her. Like a beacon in the dark, she saw it, a small light floating in the sky. She pushed as much energy as she possibly could into her little legs. If it weren't for her ragged breathing, Ruby would have let out a whoop of joy as she could make out Ashen's silhouette holding a flame in his hand. Ruby collided with him, wrapping her arms around him in an effort to feel safe. Whether from fear or hysteria, tears threatened to spill from her eyes. Her breathing slowly evened out as Ashen rubbed a circle into her back and his warmth soaked into her, calming her down. "Are you okay?" he asked. Ruby nodded before her eyes widened in remembrance of what she was running from. She ducked behind him, even going so far as to hide under his cape with only her face peeking out. "Careful. There's a Grimm chasing me," she explained. "There is not. There is. I heard it chasing. That was me." Ruby slipped out from Ashen's cape. She stared at him in shock and betrayal, her mouth gaping like a fish. "What?" Her voice was smaller than a mouse's. "I was the one who scared you over here. I tossed stones through the trees to make all the noise you heard." "What? Why would you do that?" Ruby found that the last traces of fear she felt were now morphing into something much more hot and angry. "Don't you know how scared you made me? I thought a Grimm was going to get me." Ruby wrapped her arms around herself. "I thought it was going to be a repeat of that night. I was so scared that I wouldn't get to you in time, and you're telling me that you did it on purpose. Why did you do it?" Ashen knelt in front and put a hand on her shoulder. Unsurprisingly, she pulled away. He did not fault her for being upset. "I wanted you to understand." "Understand what?" Ruby asked with a cheek puffed up in a pout. Ashen held the sunlight medallion in front of her. "I wanted you to understand what this symbol stands for, not just to me but to the people who see it." She gave him a skeptical look. "Tell me, what did you feel when you first saw my flame in the dark?" Ruby hesitated. She wanted to be stubborn to get back at him, but decided not to, as she did want to know what was the point of scaring her so badly. Revenge could come later. "I was scared, but when I saw the light, your light, I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt that as long as I could reach you, then I would be safe no matter what was chasing me. I knew you would protect me. You were hopeful that I could banish the dark away." She nodded. "You now know a bit of how I felt when I first awakened to my covenant." "Covenant?" Ashen reached out and grabbed Ruby's hand. He placed the medallion in her palm. She was surprised not only by how light it was, but also how warm to the touch it was. "This is a sunlight medallion. It identifies those who are members of the Warriors of Sunlight." "The Warriors of Sunlight?" she questioned. "I've never heard of them before." "I would be amazed if you did," Ashen chuckled sadly as she returned his medal. "I should be the last surviving member of my order." "Oh." Ruby awkwardly shuffled in place. "So, what's a Warrior of Sunlight? Were you once part of some legendary group of huntsmen?" "In a way." Ashen gestured for Ruby to follow as he walked towards the cliff. She took her spot next to him as they faced the horizon, though she made sure to be extra close to him while they stood by the ledge. "The Warriors of Sunlight is a covenant dedicated to worshipping the sun, battling the darkness of the world and offering aid to those in need." "Worshipping the sun?" Ruby giggled. "That sounds silly." "I thought so too at first. The man who introduced me to the covenant was a member himself. I was not interested at the time and saw no point in it." Shows how little I understood at the time. Who was he? Ashen sighed wistfully as he stared up at the sky. Despite the thousands of years that had passed, he considered himself blessed that he still managed to retain some of the memories of his early centuries. So much of it was long gone. His name was Mateus. The name conjured up the face of a late, middle-aged man from a key cornerstone of his past. He could make out the gray hair that still carried hints of its original auburn color, a short beard that covered most of his lower face, yet was unable to hide that fatherly smile of his. There was the twinkle in his eye that allowed him to see the potential in everyone, no matter their station or what they were. He was a good man. No, a great man. He was the kind of man you would expect to see leading a church rather than the master swordsman he had become on the battlefield. It was during the years I was left wandering the lands after my home was destroyed that I crossed paths with him. He saved me and gave me purpose. I would have been lost if it were not for him. Mateus was my first mentor. He expanded on my training and taught me to read. He even gave me a new name since I had already forgotten my own. He called me Drifter, because of my penchant for wandering and inability to stay in one place for long. I owe a lot to him. Ruby smiled. He sounds like an amazing person. He was. Ashen smiled too. Where was he from? Ashen frowned. He reached one hand up to the side of his neck. Even through his helm he could still feel it pulsing over his jugular, the dark sign. He was from one of the kingdoms. Was? He nodded. Mateus was born in one of the kingdoms to a very influential family. He would have been someone of great standing one day, maybe even a legend, but... Ashen tightened his fist so much that Ruby could hear the faint squeak of metal. Something happened. Something happened to him that he was forced to leave his home. He was exiled in all but name. Ashen finally released his grip, the metal sighing in relief. He did not deserve to be cast out into the waste. Mateus was destined for great things, but he was robbed of it all, left to wander the outlands of the kingdoms like some vagabond. Something I unfortunately learned through my unnaturally long life is that when it comes to heroes, legends, and those destined for greatness, fate is far too cruel. Fate seems to despise men like Mateus, men like me. Ruby frowned. Fate was supposed to be something that helped you, or at least that's what she understood from all the stories she read. Could fate really be that cruel? Do you want to hear the story about the day I first awakened as a warrior of sunlight? Her eyes widened in joy as she vigorously nodded her head. Are you certain? It is not a pleasant story. I do. Besides, you promised me a story. Ashen smiled sadly. Very well. This happened a few years after I had parted from Mateus. We had a disagreement of ideology. Mateus wanted to help others like us while I believed that it was a waste of time and that we should focus on ourselves. Eventually, he went his own way as he tried to help those who had been abandoned, even at the risk of his own life. I lacked the heart to follow him, so I left to travel from village to village in search of one that would accept someone like me and provide me shelter. Our paths would cross many times over the years. He was eventually joined by a fire user we called Pyromancer. The man was also an undead like myself, but he had not forgotten his name. Rather, he cast it aside after he was exiled for committing some heretical crime. It served as a fitting title to call him by. I aided the two with many endeavors over the years. One day I was tracked down by a man named Gerhardt. He was a warrior and hunter from the north. A foreigner who journeyed to our lands in search of a cure for an illness that plagued him. Mateus had sent him to find me so that we may group together. We were being driven to the very outskirts of civilization where villages and towns were few and far between, so he thought it would be safer for us, at least for a time, if we gathered together. We met up by a small village where he was trying to negotiate for some supplies to aid us in our journey. It was there that I met Spearman, another undead whom Mateus had recently taken under his wing. The man was a guardsman who was the sole survivor from a town that was raised to stop the spread of a plague. It was funny that despite him being older than me, I was more experienced with life in the wilds. He would not have lasted long were it not for Mateus' habit of looking after those who had been forsaken. Ashen paused in his story as he took a deep breath. As grateful as he was to still have this memory, it was no less painful. Ruby took a step closer and slipped her hand in his. He gave her a reassuring squeeze in return. The village we had gathered at was hostile to outsiders, especially undead like ourselves. If it were not for Mateus' way with words, they may have attacked us outright. He eventually convinced them to part with some meager rations and tools, but in exchange they wanted a service from us. There were creatures in the nearby forest, and it seemed that one of them had taken to roaming outside its territory. The beast had been killing off livestock and trampling the fields, so the villagers wanted us to put an end to it. It was night and they gave us until sunrise to slay the beast, otherwise they would withdraw from our agreement. With only torches and the moonlight to guide us, our band of 5 set off toward the forest. Must we really be doing this? We have no choice, we need the supplies. If anything, we should consider ourselves blessed that the village is even willing to deal with undead like ourselves, Drifter explained as he watched Spearman from the corner of his eye. The man was twitchy, his eyes constantly darting around at the slightest sound. There were wrinkles on his face that belonged to a much older man. From what Mateus had told him, Spearman had recently become undead, a few months at the most. To see advanced signs of hollowing so soon in him was concerning. He would have to talk to Mateus about parting ways with him before he could hollow completely. The last thing he wanted was for any of them to get stabbed in the back when he inevitably lost himself. None of us will last long out here without them, Gerhardt chimed in. Despite having already spent days traveling with the man, Drifter still found his northern accent odd to hear. But we do not need to eat, Spearman pointed out. Aye, but we still need to maintain our equipment. He stroked his long beard in thought. Have to admit that without a blacksmith to aid us there is not much we can do. Drifter had to agree with him. Out of the 5 of them, only Gerhardt and Mateus wore full suits of armor. All he had was a metal chest plate and leather gloves. He had wrapped scraps of toughened leather around his limbs, but they barely provided any protection. At least the short sword he had salvaged off a brigand's corpse was still in decent shape despite the visible nicks along the blade. Gerhardt's iron armor was at its limit. It was covered in chips, dents, and cracks to the point that it was a miracle in and of itself that it had yet to fall apart. His great axe was in a similar state. Spearman on the other hand had no armor of any kind, only a helmet and a large wooden shield to protect himself. At least the spear he carried was of good quality. More than once Drifter wondered how exactly he had come across it. Honestly, it wouldn't have surprised him if Mateus was the one to have given it to him. The rations I bartered for will help pay for the services of one. Mateus spoke up, drawing everyone's attention to him. Out of everyone here he was the best equipped. Gold embroidery danced along silver plates that covered him completely, though the shine from both had long since faded. All he was missing was the helmet that he traded away years ago as a bribe for safe passage. Drifter felt a pang of guilt at the memory. Had he kept his mouth shut then they wouldn't have been discovered and cost Mateus his father's helmet. I came across a blacksmith who would be willing to service an undead. His services will not be cheap. Are you certain about that? Gerhardt questioned. He could easily be baiting us into a trap for the church hunters to find. I have died enough times as it is and have no desire to do so again. The way of White's power has been waning. Originally there would be no safe place for an undead to hide, but now some of these villages on the outskirts are willing to put their own survival over their faith. Does not stop the church from sending bands of their hunters out here, Drifter commented. Trust me when I say we are very fortunate. There are still plenty of kingdoms where the church's power is so strong that no one would dare offer aid of any kind to an undead. They would be more inclined to strike you down where you stand the moment they lay eyes on you. Reminds me of home, Gerhardt muttered. He called over his shoulder, What about you, pyromancer? You have been oddly silent for some time now. Why not join our conversation? Or have you suddenly turned mute on us? Drifter was surprised when he noticed how far Pyromancer had fallen behind them. His form was barely lit by the flame in his hand. Rags covered his form head to toe, making him look decrepit, but underneath all those rags he knew was a full set of leather armor and a number of daggers. Those rags also hid the dark sign that marred his face, leaving only a single eye visible. From the years he had spent with him, he knew that Pyromancer was a thoughtful and quiet person. Usually he would have joined in the conversation by now. He noticed how Pyromancer would not stop rubbing his wrist. Is something wrong, old friend? Mateus stepped past them. You have grown more and more distracted these past months. Does something ail you? Is the curse acting up? Pyromancer jerked in surprise. What? No, it is nothing. I'm fine, I swear. His flame brightened in his hand, casting a stronger illumination than any of their torches could. He always had a raspy voice, but it sounded worse than usual. Please, old friend, if I can aid you, allow me to do so. You can trust me. Mateus gestured at his arm. Show me what is wrong with your wrist. It was hard to deny Mateus. With his tone of voice and the aura he exuded, it was confounding that he didn't become a priest or at the very least a cleric. After a moment of hesitation, Pyromancer relented. The others gathered around as Mateus undid the wrappings on his arm. When the final wrapping came undone, It revealed pale skin covered with swollen and pulsing black veins. What in the God's name is that? Spearman stumbled back in fear. Pyromancer, Matthäus whispered in horror. What have you done? I told you when we first met, I was exiled from my home for dabbling in things I shouldn't have, Pyromancer said while laughing hysterically. You were playing with black magic. It wasn't so much an accusation as it was a statement from Gerhardt. I thought you were exiled for meddling with chaos. Pyromancer closed his eye as he smiled weakly under his wraps. I never said chaos, only that it was forbidden. What is happening to him? Spearman asked, panicked. Is he going to go hollow? Is he going to turn into a monster? Surely we are not going to keep traveling with him? With each question, Spearman kept raising his voice louder and louder. Drifter stepped over to him before grabbing him by the shoulder and yanking him close to hiss into his ear. Shut your mouth and be quiet. He shoved him back before turning to Matthäus. What are we going to do now? We deal with the beast, he answered. Pyromancer, I want you to wait for us back at the village. The rest of us will. Matthäus, Pyromancer interrupted, I know what you are trying to do. I appreciate the gesture, but it's pointless. Nonsense. Once we are done here, we can find someone to treat you. With how far in the outskirts we are, it should be easier to find a witch who may know what to do. Spearman inhaled sharply. Drifter gave him a warning look as he rested his hand on the pommel of his sword. After a brief moment, Spearman turned away. I've already tried, he explained. Soon after I first noticed the signs, I used a purging stone and it did nothing. This isn't hollowing, this is something else, something worse. That does not mean we cannot do something about it. I am certain. Matthäus, please. There is nothing anyone can do for me anymore. I can feel it inside me, squirming around. It burns so bad and yet, it feels so cold. I can hear, whispering clawing through my head. I tried so hard to keep it at bay, but I no longer can. It will surge soon and I feel that I won't survive it. Pyromancer. It is why I wanted to join you on one last quest. My life was never worth much. At least I can make my death mean something, even if it's for a people that would never thank me for it. Regardless of how everything turns out. I know I am not coming back from that forest. This is the end for me, so let me face it on my terms. Fair enough. Everyone turned toward Gerhardt, who had been observing in silence. I can respect a man who is willing to face his end head-on, but from here on you have to take point. Whatever is waiting for us, you will have to face it first. At the very least you will serve as a good enough distraction for the rest of us. Gerhardt, Matthäus warned. Drifter stepped up next to him. Look, I may owe you for saving my life from the church hunters, but that doesn't mean that I will just trust whatever decision you make. I have not known him as long as you, therefore I cannot trust my back to someone who could lose themselves at any moment. I have died enough times as it is. I will do it. Matthäus turned to Pyromancer in surprise. Are you sure? He has made his decision, Gerhardt cut in. Let the man choose his own fate. It is a rare blessing that few are granted. And what about you two? Do either of you have something to say? Spearman shifted uncomfortably. Though he remained quiet, it was obvious from his body language alone who he was siding with. As much as Drifter hated to do so, he had to agree with Gerhardt. Let him take point, he said as he backed away from him. There is nothing else we can do for him. Pyromancer reached out to grasp Matthäus' shoulder. My journey would have ended long ago if not for you. I am forever grateful for the faith you placed in an exile such as I, but it is time for my journey to end, like all good journeys must. Matthäus gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent conversation passing between the two before he released him. Reigniting his flame, Pyromancer stepped past him with everyone falling in behind him. Eventually the group reached the edge where the forest began. It seems that the village head withheld some important information, Pyromancer stated as the group found themselves standing at the top of a steep hill as the forest that they were supposed to search sat deep at the bottom of a sunken valley. The trees were so tall that they cast an illusion of normalcy from a distance. Gods, look at the canopy, Spearman pointed out. The leaves are so thick that you are unable to see the ground floor. Must be pitch black down there. How are we supposed to navigate through that? We will have to trust our torches and Pyromancer's light to see us through. Matthäus drew the greatsword that was strapped to his back. Unlike his armor, the sword still shined beautifully as if it was recently forged. Gold embroidery was entwined with silver steel as veins of titanite danced across its surface. We are short of time. Wait, Pyromancer said as he raised his hand in the air. Do you smell that? There is a faint smell of something sweet, and pungent in the air, Gerhardt spoke up. Is that rot? Something is not right with this place. Pyromancer kneeled on the ground and grabbed a handful of dirt. He squeezed until a thin stream of discolored water poured out. It has not rained for days, yet the ground is soaked, he examined. For the land to be expelling water to such a degree and the smell, I believe this forest is becoming blighted. Blighted? Are you saying this place is poisoned? Spearman questioned. No, or at least not yet. If this forest was blighted, then we would have been able to smell the rot from farther away. At most, I would say we should be cautious, as there may be pockets of the forest that have rotted and will be dangerous if we attempt to cut through. There has to be another way. What if we wait for daylight? We have until daylight to kill the beast, Mathis explained. That was the provision the village head gave us that we must fulfill, otherwise they will not trade with us. How the hell are we supposed to find this beast in the dark, much less fight it? And that is if we don't poison ourselves navigating this forest. They are sending us to die. Surely you all see this. Of course they are. We are undead, or have you forgotten? Drifter was growing tired of Spearman's complaining. He did not know what Mateus saw in this man. Spearman was a lost cause and should have been left to the fate of the curse. They do not give a shit about the likes of us. What we should be concerned with is ensuring that they keep their end of the bargain after we complete their task. This is an impossible task. Maybe we don't have to do it. I mean, they are just villagers. Between the 5 of us we could simply... Spearman was cut off as Gerhardt jabbed him in the chest with the head of his axe. Don't you fucking dare finish that sentence, he roared. We may be cursed, but we still have our pride and honor as men. If such concepts are so foreign to a man like you, then you are no different from the monsters that roam the wilds, and I will cut you down here and now. Enough. Mateus stepped between the two, separating them. He shot Drifter a chastising look as he stepped away from behind Spearman and sheathed his sword. We cannot be fighting amongst ourselves. Gerhardt is right, though. Attacking and stealing from those people would make us no better than the monsters they believe us to be. I understand you are afraid. We all are. No one here wants to go hollow. It is a fate worse than death. None of us will survive on our own. We must rely on ourselves and each other if we want to avoid such a fate. The curse will not last forever. If we endure until the flame is strengthened once more, then we will be free and able to return to our homes. How do you know? How can you be so certain that this curse will go away? Before I was exiled, my family kept close ties to the Way of White. That relationship granted me access to certain records of the Order. This is not the first time the curse has appeared, but each time that it has, it was eventually defeated and the cursed set free by a champion. Even if we do not find a way to undo the curse ourselves, it is only a matter of time before it is beaten back once more. Mateus extended a hand towards Spearman. We can overcome this, but only if we stand together. You will not be facing this alone. You will have brothers who will stand beside you. The only question I have for you is if you are willing to do the same. Spearman looked at his hand hesitantly before clasping it. I will. I don't want to give up, not yet. Mateus glanced to Gerhardt, his gaze asking the same question. He rolled his eyes. I am here, am I not? Just never let me hear you utter such words again, he said as he slung his axe over his shoulder. I expect more from a town guardsman. Spearman nodded in understanding. I will do better. So, I guess we really are doing this. Well, what are we waiting for? Pyromancer chuckled. Away with words like always, Mateus. Is everyone ready to head down? He received a series of nods. Stay close and keep a good grip on your torches. I suspect the bottom will be flooded, so watch your step. As Pyromancer led the group down into the forest, Mateus hung back to walk in step with Drifter. Save it. I know what you are going to say. I'm not trying to start a fight, I only wanted to share some words of wisdom my father once shared with me. Humanity is only as strong as the weakest burden it carries on its back. What is that supposed to mean? Mateus gave him a sad smile. Our strength is measured not by the obstacles we overcome, but by the burdens we carry while doing so. I know you are afraid, but if you keep trying to sever ties the moment you feel they are a burden to you, then you will find yourself alone with nowhere to go in the world. Drifter touched the mark on his throat. I am pretty sure your father did not have to face an impossible task such as this. There is no such thing as an impossible task, only a highly difficult one. He reached out and gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze before walking ahead to take position behind Pyromancer. The forest was in worse shape than they initially thought. At a passing glance, everything seemed normal, but upon closer inspection, one could easily spot the mold and rot that was setting into the trees. As Pyromancer predicted, The ground was absolutely soaked with water. More than once did one of them step in a puddle only to be surprised by a hole hiding underneath. Gerhardt had become particularly foul-mouthed after suffering a tumble that left him drenched. Drifter didn't doubt that before long this forest would transform into a swamp, a blighted one at that. He had to adjust his grip on his torch as he stumbled once again. As expected, the forest canopy was blocking out what little moonlight they could have used to aid them. Without their torches and pyromancer's light, the group would have been trapped in abject darkness. The only noise was the splashing of their footsteps. The lack of other sounds was bothering him more than he cared to admit. The deeper they traveled into the forest, the greater his sense of foreboding was becoming. "Anyone else feeling that we have been played for fools?" Gerhardt asked. "What do you mean?" Spearman questioned. "We have yet to encounter anything. And don't you find that strange? The villagers claimed that this forest was infested with all sorts of monsters." He gestured around them with his axe. "Well, where are all these so-called monsters? Are you actually disappointed that we are not fighting for our lives right now?" Spearman asked incredulously. "You would not understand. You are used to fighting on walls where you have the advantage. I prefer a straightforward fight. Before I was cursed and forced from my homeland, my family was known for the many beasts we had slain. Did any of you manage to slay a dragon?" Drifter asked. Not yet, but just you wait. Once I am free from this curse, I intend to travel north of my homeland. There are rumors that some still roam there, and I intend to add one to our name. I will be welcomed back as a hero. Let me tell you too right now, there is nothing like the timeless clash between man and beast. The thrill of the hunt, that moment when you prove man's superiority over the raw savagery of nature. There is nothing quite like that feeling. Careful, Mateusz chided. Pride comes before the fall. Dragons are not some simple beast that any man can slay. You have a long way to go before you will be ready to challenge such a foe. If you are too reckless, you may end up losing yourself before you can get the chance to do so. Gerhardt rolled his eyes. Shove off, old man. Do not lecture me like I am the boy or the greenhorn. I have been in more battles than the two put together. I have no intention of ever falling to a simple-minded beast. As if that was not made clear to me before, Drifter commented dryly. If I had not been there to stop you, you would have fought every living creature we had come across during our journey here. Spearman snorted in amusement. Were it not for the fact that we are ungodly blights on the world, I would think that being undead would be a boon for you. You could hunt down any beast, no matter how dangerous. If you die, then you can just try again. Those dragons will not stand a chance. I told you before. Undead or not, I still have my pride. I will be damned before I let a mere animal or abomination get the best of me. What would be the point of beating it once if it killed me 100 times in turn? No, I will not accept defeat from any beast regardless that I am now undead. Then don't underestimate them, Pyromancer spoke up. Animals and beasts can prove to be much more clever than you would expect. Dragons especially. Underestimate them at your own peril. Oh, and what would you know? My former master and his tribe of pyromancers live in the rocky landscape by a volcano. The land is harsh, and so too is the wildlife that takes up residence there. Rivers of lava flowed just under the surface, so you had to watch your step or that would be it for you. The ground would thin at places to the point where the weight of your foot would be enough to punch through the rock straight into the molten lava underneath. Anything that desired to live there had to adapt quickly, something all the wildlife had done. What kind did you have? Anything interesting? Nothing you could take home and brag about, he chuckled. The most notable creatures we had were a unique breed of cow-sized goats that would occasionally eat men, and giant stone lizards. Bah, those things do not sound so difficult to deal with. But they are clever, he emphasized. Every creature that I have seen inhabiting that place has a good sense of the land. They know where the ground is weak and where the pitfalls lie. It made hunting difficult, as many of the animals would purposely try and lead us into such traps. I've seen men get careless and pay for it. The lucky ones would lose a leg at most. As for the others, well, it is not like lava leaves anything to be buried. Gerhardt mulled his words over with a doubtful expression on his face. All right, I will admit some creatures can grow crafty as they age, but those are only the survivors that manage to live so long. Drifter could see Mateusz shake his head. Most will rely on nothing but their base instincts even in their old age. Besides, you speak as if they can think like us. I take it that you have never met a dog before. Gerhardt snorted. You can train a dog to be smart, otherwise they are simple mutts. Pyromancer sighed in disappointment. Let it not be said that I did not warn you. One day he froze before drawing one of his daggers. There is something ahead. In an instant, Everyone readied their weapons and scanned the shadows for the slightest movement. Mateus stepped up next to him. Can you see it? Not really. Wait. Look, he pointed, right there in that pool of water. Slowly the group approached, their torches peeling away the shadows. The floor gave way to a shallow pond that spread out into the darkness. Resting in the water in front of them was a large black boulder. That is a rock, Spearman stated. No. I can sense something from it. Whatever it is alive. Before anyone could say anything else, Gerhardt, with a mighty heave, threw his great axe at it. The boulder exploded in a shower of green blood and fragments of a black carapace. A pair of pincers briefly burst from the water before sinking under. Well, I guess you were right, he quipped. He stepped forward to retrieve his axe when Mateus stopped him. Allow me. There may be others in the water and you will be vulnerable without your weapon. Gerhardt snorted before he took a step back. The group waited with bated breath as Mateus waded into the water to retrieve the axe. Drifter leaned forward as his eyes scanned the water's surface for the slightest ripple. The water was thick and murky, making it impossible to see if something was hiding underneath the surface. Thankfully, Mateus managed to yank Gerhardt's axe free and return without incident. I believe we found your missing beasts. Giant insects, Gerhardt stated. Well, at least they are better than nothing. Drifter took a deep breath as he tightened his grip on his sword. We have to deal with a forest filled with these things and hunt down the village monster. Great, as if things could not get more difficult. I believe our situation is much worse, Spearman spoke up. What do you mean? Before Redwood fell, I would occasionally be stationed at the gates. There, I would strike up conversations with the guardsmen of various caravans. I learned a few things from the encounters they had talked about. There are more than a few places where you can encounter giant insects and other abominations around these parts. They have been showing up more frequently around these parts as the corruption of the undead spreads. If we are in a forest infested with giant insects and we have not been attacked, not even once, then that means there is something here. Something so fearsome it has cowed them into hiding. They are hiding because the damn thing is out there stalking us, Gerhardt growled. He brandished his axe as he called out into the darkness, Come out, coward. We know you are out there. Save us the trouble and bring us your head. I doubt the beast can even understand you. Hell, are you sure you are not yelling into the wind? Drifter asked. Everyone turned as they heard the sound of a wet smack followed by a large object splashing toward them. An oblong shape rolled into the edge of their vision. From the many legs they could make out clawing at the air as it attempted to right itself, it was another insect the size of a large dog. Drifter, being the closest to it, took a step forward in an attempt to shine a little more light on it. Did it try to throw a bug at us? I told you it was here. Still think the beast is simple-minded? Enough. Ready yourselves. Spearman stabbed his torch in the body of a nearby tree to wield his shield, with Gerhardt and Mathis following suit. The rotting wood gave way with little effort and provided decent holds which granted them a small lit area to fight in. The group formed a loose circle as they scanned the shadows for the slightest trace of their prey. The only sounds they could hear were the chittering of the insect it threw at them. The insect in question managed to right itself on its feet. Even with the distance and low amount of light between them, Drifter could make out its red eyes as it stared at his group. After a brief moment, it shuffled in place until its back was facing them. After a small click, the back of its carapace opened up exposing fur. Drifter, get down. After the many years fighting by his side, Drifter had learned to trust Mateus' instincts far more than his own. He dove to the side as thin white spines whistled through the air where he was standing. There were exclamations of surprise before a fireball sailed through the air and engulfed the insect in flames. It thrashed in place momentarily before slumping to the ground, dead. The body whistled as steam from its boiled innards escaped its shell. Spearman helped Drifter to his feet. Are you all right? Did it get you? It missed me. Thanks for the hand. Ready yourselves, Pyromancer called out. The beast approaches. They could hear something plod through the water towards them. It was slow. For a moment that felt like it was dragging on for hours, the only noise in the air was the crackling of torches, the heavy breathing of 5 warriors and the wet treading of footsteps. Soon, those footsteps were joined by a low growl as a dark shape formed on the periphery of their vision. First to form from the shadow was a long muzzle with oversized dagger-like teeth. A pair of sunken and sickly-looking yellow eyes rested atop the muzzle. Long, thick strand-like hair lay matted to its body by filth and water. The forward body was bulky and muscular, only to noticeably shrink and become scrawny at its hindquarters. And the smell. Gods, it smelled like a rotting corpse. Honestly, the closest comparison to any known animal Drifter could make was some sort of demented crossbreed of a wolf and a bear. It definitely had the size of the latter. There was no doubt the blight setting into this forest had also affected this creature, mutating it from whatever it once was. "You finally show yourself," Gerhardt said with a smile. "I was hoping you would be bigger, but no matter. I will claim your head all the same." In response to his challenge, the beast roared out in defiance. Drifter flinched back in surprise. The roar transformed into a high-pitched shriek that pierced the ears. From the water beside Mateusz, a man-sized centipede burst from the surface and thrashed in the air. With a single swing of his sword, he bisected it. "The beast is throwing the nearby insects into a frenzy," Pyromancer exclaimed. Drifter barely managed to hear him through the ringing in his ears. "We need to kill it before it brings the entire forest down on our heads. We need to bait it out of the water." "Leave that to me." Gerhardt charged forward with a roar of his own. The beast lunged forward to meet him with a swing of its paw. He froze mid-charge, allowing the swipe to go wide. Claws barely missed him before he swung out and carved a deep gash down its forearm. It cried out in pain before lunging forward, jaws clamping shut on thin air as it missed once more. Gerhardt kept baiting it forward with short back steps that left him just barely out of range of its swipes and snapping jaws. Throughout it all, Gerhardt wore a feral grin on his face as he courted death in a dance as old as time itself. Sickly yellow eyes had been so focused on the prey in front of it, that it was only when it felt twin burning sensations from its sides did it realize its mistake. Drifter and Mateusz dodged back, avoiding its retaliation. Spearman struck at the creature from behind, his spear piercing through its knee and stumbling the beast. Before it could turn and lash out at him, a fireball burst against its head, setting its fur alight. The beast howled in pain as it thrashed around violently, forcing the group to back away. "You know, I was hoping for more of a challenge," Gerhardt commented as he looked to Pyromancer. "Looks like you will have to find somewhere else to die." "Focus," Mateusz chided. "We have the beast cornered. I should not need to tell you what happens when you corner an animal." "I think we got more company," Spearman spoke up. "Shit." Drifter could see a swarm of insects encroaching on their position from behind. "They sense an easy kill," Pyromancer explained, his eyes never leaving the beasts in front of him. He could see the intelligence hiding behind its malice. It was going to try to bide its time. Time he did not have, not when the burning in his veins was getting worse. Those are just the impatient ones. Once this beast is dead, the rest will have nothing to fear and try to overrun us. We have to finish this quickly before any more come. "Drifters, Spearmen, cover our backs," Mateusz ordered. "The three of us can finish this thing off by ourselves." "All right. Spearmen, take the right, I will handle the left." "Got it." Drifter held his torch out as a shield in front of him while the two of them confronted the swarm. There had to be somewhere between 2 or 3 dozen of the insects. Each was around the size of a dog and varied from ant and beetle-like to strange variations he could obviously tell were not natural. He would be lying if he said that all the chittering wasn't sending chills down his spine. The sooner they got out of this forest, the better. The swarm was slow to approach. If there were fewer of them, it would be easier to scatter them by just slaying a few. "Hold the line. We have no room to fall back unless we want to endanger the others." "I know that. I may have been a simple guard, but I know what to do during a fight." Any further conversation was cut as the first group of insects charged them. Drifter thrusted his torch at the lead-most insect, a large beetle-shaped one. It abandoned its charge and snapped its pincers at him angrily. He responded by stabbing it through its eye. Surprisingly, the shell was softer than Drifter expected. He ended up splitting its skull with the blow, killing it. There was the sound of dull impacts on wood next to him, quickly followed by the splitting of chitin. "Their shells are not as hard as I would expect," Spearman spoke up. "I guess not even bugs are safe from the rot." "Then we have no excuse to not finish this quickly." When the next insect charged him, instead of aiming for a weak point on its body, he swung out at its core. There was a moment of slight resilience before his sword split the bug open like a rotten fruit. Drifter couldn't help the smile that appeared on his. The swarm was still a threat that could overwhelm them if they got careless. Now it felt so much more manageable. It was unlikely now that this fight would get dragged out, even as more trickled in. Soon they would be able to return and help the others. The two went to work culling the swarm and staining the ground with their multicolored blood. At one point, one of the smaller insects went for Drifter's leg. He managed to dodge it before putting his foot through its head. Spearman huddled behind his shield to hold the bulwark back while he lashed out with his spear, occasionally using it like an oversized club and crippling those unfortunate to be hit by it. More than once did something latch onto his spear and he had to wrestle with it. A quick introduction to his boot would be enough to solve the problem. Throughout their fighting, Drifter kept some focus on the fight occurring behind them. The air was filled with the smell of burning fur. He could make out the tearing of flesh and howls of pain, punctuated by taunts from Gerhardt. From the sounds of it, the fight was going their way. At this rate, it seemed that all of them would be leaving this forest alive. Pyromancer. Drifter attempted to turn at Mateusz's cry before something crashed into him and knocked him to the ground. His torch slipped from his grip and rolled away. With a curse, Spearman ran over and took up position over them. He kicked the torch toward the swarm, forcing them to split and back away. Get up and check on your friend. I will do what I can to hold off what remains of these bugs. Spearman charged into the remnants of the swarm. While they had reduced their numbers to a mere dozen, there were more gathering to replace the fallen. He lashed out with his spear in large arcs, angering the insects and forcing all their attention on him. I am probably going to die here, he muttered as another swarm crawled out of the darkness to join the first. Surprisingly, he found a sort of peace in these words. With a fervor he did not know himself capable of, he charged the largest insect, skewering it on his spear before chucking its corpse at its brethren. Whatever he couldn't skewer with his spear, he bashed to a pulp with his shield. He lashed out viciously with no sense of self-preservation. Despite everything that had happened in his life, all the failures and letdowns, he found fulfillment in this small moment. It may have only been against insects, yet Spearman found himself living out an old, nearly forgotten childhood dream of his. And with that sense of fulfillment, he had never felt more alive. With Spearman holding the swarm back, Drifter was able to rise to his feet. To his horror, he found that the object that had knocked him over was Pyromancer. 3 deep gashes were carved into his torso. He didn't know which was worse, his injuries or the pitch-black ichor that he was coughing up and seeping through his wounds. Shit. Drifter tried to pick him up only to be waved off. Stop, he hacked out. Do not touch me unless you want this to spread to yourself. With much effort, Pyromancer managed to raise himself up onto a knee. He planted his hand on his chest, flooding his body with his pyromancy. Is there anything I can do to help? Pyromancer laughed ruefully, though it sounded more like wheezing. He reached up and ripped off the wrappings covering his head and face. His once vibrant red hair had faded yellow and had been reduced to clumps that were slowly falling away. Black spots and veins stood out against unnaturally pale white skin. The dark sign that marred the left half of his face was exposed, yet what drew Drifter's attention were the black veins that crawled and squirmed across his face as they slowly inched their way toward it. His right eye was slowly swallowed by black ichor that flooded into his eye. By the gods! Pyromancer flashed him a grin, his teeth stained with the same black substance. This is my punishment for my hubris. I did not believe it worthy of the same respectful fear that I gave my flame. You and Mateusz have been great companions to a fool like me, and I am grateful for the adventures you had joined me on. Take this final advice from a sorry fool and never let it go. The abyss is untamable, it is all-consuming. Pyromancer doubled over as he hacked up more of the black ichor. Instead of splattering on the floor, the substance clung to his skin and squirmed. He intensified his pyromancy to keep it back just a little longer. Fear it, he gasped in pain. Fear and avoid the abyss at all costs. When Pyromancer met Drifter's gaze, he gave him one last smile as a tear ran from his corrupted eye. I am sorry that I cannot stay with either of you till the end. Please remember me as long as you can. Pyromancer stumbled to his feet and charged back into the fray as flame and black ichor began to burst from his body. Drifter could do nothing but watch as his old friend charged straight into death's embrace. No words came to him as his hand grasped empty air. The beast the three had been fighting was heavily maimed and burned. It bled profusely from its many wounds, the worst of which being a missing left paw and a gash that claimed half its face. Despite its wounds, desperation allowed the beast to keep fighting with its ferocity and strength seemingly unaffected. Right here, beast? Pyromancer yelled. His voice was distorting and his flesh smoldering from the fire he had been pumping into his veins. Do you intend to die alone? Then come at me. I am ready. We can journey together into the dark. Pyromancer, what are you doing? Mateusz cried out. The beast's remaining eye locked on to Pyromancer's crippled form. The instincts that warned it of the danger of his glowing form were overwritten by its desperation and fear. All the beast saw was a wounded hunter and a way to break free from its predicament. It charged forward with newfound strength and a roar of defiance. Mateus attempted to stop its charge. He embedded his sword into its side, feet planted into the ground, locking him in place. The beast's momentum caused it to tear its side open, effectively disemboweling it, but it was not enough to stop it. Gerhardt, recognizing what was going to happen, grabbed Mateus and pulled him away as the beast's jaws clamped shut over Pyromancer's torso. The sound of a wet crunch of flesh and bone echoed through the air before Pyromancer's body erupted in a thunderous, fiery explosion. The force of the explosion sent everyone to the ground and scattered the insects that were on the verge of overwhelming spearmen. Chunks of burning flesh and blood rained down around them. All the burning flesh and fur illuminated a far greater area than their torches did. Drifter stumbled onto his feet as he stared dumbly at the remains of the beast. The entire upper torso was blown to pieces, leaving behind the smoldering remains of its hindquarters. There was no trace left of Pyromancer, his friend. "I can't believe he did it," Spearman remarked. "It was a good kill," Gerhardt said as he stepped up to the remains. Drifter absently noticed that he was missing his left shoulder pauldron and had new grooves carved into his armor. Mateus appeared by his side. "Are you okay?" he asked. Drifter could only nod in response. He gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze before turning to Gerhardt, who was walking towards them. In his hands was a piece of the creature's jaw. With a little prying, he pulled free the two largest fangs from the jawbone. Gerhardt handed him the smaller of the two. "A trophy and proof of your friend's kill," Gerhardt explained. "I feel it is only appropriate that one of you take it on his behalf." "Thank you. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but that explosion knocked some of the torches free and scattered them," Spearman spoke up. "We only have one left and I don't know how much longer the creature's flesh is going to burn. So this is the part where we fight our way out." Gerhardt rolled his shoulders. "Hopefully it serves as a better challenge than the beast was." As if on cue, the air filled with the sounds of buzzing and chittering as large groups of insects began to encroach on their position. Drifter could see larger insects joining the growing swarm. "I will take point this time." Mateus took the torch from Spearman. "Stay close behind me. Once we start moving we cannot stop for anything, understand?" Everyone nodded as they grouped up behind him. Both groups were poised to charge, the air thick with tension. Just when the dam was ready to burst, the pressure suddenly receded. The swarm turned and fled. The group stared at the retreating swarm, dumbfounded. "What?" Drifter's confused comment echoed everyone's thoughts as a heavy presence began to settle over them. There was a large, heavy splash in the water behind them that managed to send tremors through the ground. Slowly the four turned around. Drifter's face paled in fear as he found himself staring down a similar creature as the one Pyromancer had slain. "There was a second one," he whispered in disbelief. "This creature was much, much larger than the first, almost 3 times the size. Plates of pale black and white chitin peeked out from its dull red fur. A long reptilian-like tail swished in the water behind it. Where the smaller one seemed to be in poor health, this one was still healthy and strong. A pair of antenna-like horns curved over its head as 2 disjointed eyes glanced among the 4, a familiar yellow one with an insect-like red one. The chimera looked over them toward the remains of its fallen comrade. It walked around them to stand over the corpse. The sound of pained whimpering filled the air. "I think we killed its mate," Spearman said in horror. Mateus noticed the partially distended stomach and the pink tips of teats that poked through its fur. "No, we killed its child." The whimpering changed into a growl before erupting into a pained and wrathful wail. Drifter and Spearman collapsed to their knees as they tried to block out the scream. Gerhardt and Mateus managed to stay on their feet. Despite the pain he was no doubt feeling, there was a smile on Gerhardt's face. "Finally, a real challenge," he said as soon as the wailing stopped and readied his axe. The chimera turned to face them, its eyes glowing with malevolence and promising revenge. It bared knife-like teeth at them. "Circle it," Mateus called out. "We need to kill it before the light goes out." The chimera's head snapped toward him. Mateus met its gaze unflinchingly. After a short moment it raised its head into the air and howled. Unlike before, this one was very low in pitch, to the point that they could barely hear it. "What was that?" "I don't know. Be ready for anything. If we kill it then it won't matter what that was." "Oh shit. Behind us." Drifter turned around at Spearman's cry. Giant insects were approaching once more. "Look out." He turned back to see a large set of jaws closing in on him. His breath caught in fear. With a mighty roar, Gerhardt embedded his axe in the chimera's muzzle and forced its head to the side, saving his life as its jaws missed. Drifter stumbled back as, in a show of strength, Gerhardt pushed the creature back, forcing it to break off or risk getting tossed on its side. Gerhardt breathed heavily. "This creature is tough," he muttered with a smile. "It will make a great kill to take home. Spearman, can you hold the back line while the three of us deal with this monster? Are you sure the three of you will be enough to kill it? That all depends on if you can hold." "I will do it. No, I can do it. Just know that more bugs will keep coming, so if your fight takes too long, eventually they will ignore me for the rest of you. I will try to prevent that as long as I can. That's all I ask. Now go. Drifter, have you regained our senses?" "Yes." "Take its flanks. Avoid facing it head-on, leave that to us. This thing is smarter than its child. And it will die just the same." The chimera's eyes glowed with rage as it stared down Gerhardt. It reared back once more to screech and summon more of the lessers. It was easy for it to manipulate their weak-minded kind. No matter what it took, it was not going to allow any of them to leave here alive. Matthäus and Gerhardt charged toward it, but to their surprise, it backed away and tried to keep the distance between them. Where the child was reckless and hyper-aggressive, the parent was more cautious and patient. Even with the extended range from the still-burning fires, there was only so far they could pursue it. They could feel the ticking of the clock as the flames slowly waned in potency. "Damn beast is a coward," Gerhardt growled. "Gerhardt, we need to fall back," Matthäus whispered to him. "What? You must be. Gerhardt, trust me on this." A silent conversation passed between the two before understanding dawned in Gerhardt's eyes. He turned and fled. "Drifter," Matthäus called out. "We can't face this creature. We have to flee." Without second-guessing him, Drifter turned his back on the beast and followed after Gerhardt. The chimera's eyes widened in alarm as it looked past the fleeing predators toward the swarm. It was not large enough yet to prevent them from fleeing. With an angry growl, it chased after them. Now that the creature had moved further into their dwindling arena, Matthäus spun on his heel and threw his sword. The sword embedded itself into its shoulder and sent it crashing face first into the ground. Before it could get up, Matthäus used its long snout as a stepping stone to jump up and reclaimed his sword. In the process, he tore open a great hole in its shoulder as he jumped free. Before the chimera could retaliate, Gerhardt was already upon it with Drifter close behind, him being the slowest to respond. Despite its attempts to defend itself, Gerhardt managed to slice down its forearm, toward its paw and sever two of its fingers. He managed to duck back and avoid getting his head bitten off by a hair's breadth. Drifter managed to strike out at a hind leg, but was only able to deliver a shallow wound. He barely avoided the chimera's tail as it swung out at them. Now the chimera found itself trapped in a triangle by the three. Every time it tried to face Drifter, the weakest of the three, the group would circle around so that it was always facing down either Gerhardt or Matthäus, causing it to growl in annoyance. They would not give it the chance to break free. Despite having both arms drenched with its blood and missing a few fingers, it was more than capable of holding its own against the three. Blood soaked the ground as the three danced around it and delivered whatever wounds they could while avoiding its devastating retaliatory strikes that tore up the earth around them. Its hide proved to be very thick and a hindrance. At one point, Drifter managed to cut its tail in half, but had snapped his blade in two in the process. Drifter couldn't help but get nervous. The light from the remaining flames was quickly dimming and they were unable to land any fatal blows. Matthäus and Gerhardt were more than capable of delivering a devastating blow to the creature, but if that blow did not kill it instantly, then they would be left vulnerable to a counterstrike from it. Considering its strength, a single hit could be enough to end any of them. It didn't help that Spearman was yelling at them to hurry. The quick glance he spared his way made his heart jump to his throat. There were now insects the size of wolves composing the swarm. By the gods, how big did the abominations in this forest get? There were various wounds all over Spearman's body from strikes that managed to slip by his defense. He was at his limit and would not be able to hold much longer. Already some were breaking off and circling around in the darkness of the forest. Their fear of the creature was probably the only reason they had not pounced yet. But for how long? Maybe that fear was why he did what he did. He charged in during what he thought was an opening, failing to notice what should have been an obvious tell that the chimera still had sight on him. It struck back with a hind leg like a mule and caught him in the chest. The force, while thankfully weaker than what it could muster with its forearms, was more than enough to send him flying backwards and fracture a few ribs. The chimera used the opportunity he provided to break free from their encirclement. It fell back until most of its body was enshrouded in the growing darkness and only its face was easily visible. Its head perked up and glanced to the side before it settled on Gerhardt. Drifter swore the creature was smiling at them mockingly. He managed to drag himself back onto his feet when Gerhardt, never one to back down from a challenge, charged in once more with a battle cry. "Gerhardt, wait!" Matthäus warned, but it was too late. The air whistled as spear-sized spines flew out from the darkness. 3 of them impacted against Gerhardt, puncturing through his chest and side and knocking him to the ground. He cried out in pain as he struggled to raise himself off the ground. "Look out!" Gerhardt looked up in time to see the chimera lunge at him. In a final act of defiance, he lashed out with his axe in an attempt to land one more blow. He disappeared as the creature crashed into him, the impact sending mud and dirt into the air. There was the screeching of metal followed by the tearing of flesh before the chimera flicked its head and tossed the remains of Gerhardt's torso into the darkness toward the origin of the spines. Drifter's horror quickly turned into rage. He charged in while the creature's back was still toward him. "Drifter, stop. Things were not supposed to go this way. They were supposed to slay this creature and then be on their way somewhere that could undo or delay the curse. No one deserved to die in a place like this. He didn't want to die in a place like this. Alone and in the dark." Drifter stabbed what remained of his blade into the creature's side before he tried to rip it forward. Unfortunately, he didn't get far before there was a light ping and his sword slipped free. An empty hilt was all that was left of his blade. Fear clutched his heart as he was now helpless before the beast. In response, it swatted him away with greater force than before. His body shattered the bark of a tree as he ricocheted off it and landed face down on the edge of the pond. The bitter taste of copper and filth filled his mouth as he choked on the tainted waters and his own blood. The blow must have shattered his entire rib cage. It was a struggle to simply roll himself onto his side to prevent himself from drowning. While an undead's body could take more abuse than a normal human's, there were still limits to how far it could be pushed. His ears rang as his vision blurred in the encroaching darkness. Was it from the fading lights or was he about to pass out? A blood-soaked spearman stepped into his vision. He was shouting and waving his arms, but Drifter couldn't make out what he was saying. Then to his shock, Spearman turned and ran. His surprise morphed into anger and he croaked out a single word, "Coward." The air and water around Drifter shifted as something bound over his body. He watched as the chimera pounced on Spearman, his form faded to an outline in the dark. All he could see was its silhouette as it tore him to shreds. It would be a lie to say he didn't feel a small sense of satisfaction at the sight. A torch flew through the air before landing near the creature, illuminating it and the mangled remains of Spearman. It turned its blood-soaked muzzle toward the source. Matthäus charged toward it, now with Gerhardt's great axe in his offhand. Drifter struggled to raise himself to his feet so he could follow him. The chimera swung at him only to have Matthäus meet its blow with his own. His sword swung into a bone-deep gash that Gerhardt had managed to carve into its arm earlier. It managed to slip inside the wound with most of its momentum intact and shattered bone. The remaining force was still enough to tear through its flesh and sever its arm. The beast howled in pain as it tried to stumble away. Capitalizing on its moment of weakness, Matthäus threw Gerhardt's axe at its head. He managed to impale it in the eye and caused it to reel back in pain. Taking a risk, Matthäus launched himself at the chimera's throat. By either luck or the blessings of the gods, he avoided its snapping jaws and brought his blade down through the flesh of its neck. While he was unable to decapitate it, he had managed to tear its throat open and drench himself with its blood. The chimera thrashed around in its death throes, splattering its blood everywhere. Matthäus vanished from view as a stray stream of blood extinguished the last torch. Darkness closed in on Drifter as a faint, dying glow was all that kept him from its grasp. He had dragged himself to his knees when Matthäus appeared beside him. "We need to run," he breathed out as he tried to catch his breath. The beast's dying cries filled the background as the final embers on the field died out and cast them in absolute darkness. He could hear the sound of scurrying as insects moved past them. Mathis threw Drifter's arm over his shoulder as he pulled him to his feet. "On your feet. We cannot afford to stop moving. If we stop for a second then we are both dead." Drifter did his best to hobble along as Matthäus carried him forward. The screams in the background were soon joined by the tearing of flesh. Eventually Drifter managed to recover enough to support himself and allowed them to pick up the pace. It quickly proved fortunate as the chimera let loose one last deafening scream that shook the trees. In response, the forest came alive. The darkness became filled with the sounds of chittering and the snapping of mandibles. To the two's horror, the sound of buzzing joined the chorus. "Keep moving," Matthäus yelled in order to be heard over the noise. He grabbed Drifter's arm in the darkness and pulled him in a new direction. The action caused him to stumble and he would have fallen had Matthäus not kept a firm grip on him. Focus on staying on your feet. We will make it out of here, the sun has not abandoned us. Despite the faith in his words, Drifter could not keep himself from being terrified. It was difficult. It felt so difficult. His lungs burned with each breath he took and his legs ached. From the noise that surrounded them, he knew that they were being pursued. Easy prey for this forest of monsters. More than once did the air by him churn as something whizzed by in an attempt to cut down or grab him. Were it not for Mateus guiding him, he surely would have crashed into a tree or fallen by now. He was tempted to give up and surrender himself to the forest. At least that way Mateus would have a better chance to escape without him holding him back. Before he could contemplate it any further, Mateus grabbed and shielded him with his body. The sounds of spines whizzed through the air around them, occasionally joined by the pop of metal as a few punctured through his armor. Mateus coughed and Drifter felt warm liquid splatter on the side of his face. Mateus. He grabbed his arm before forcing a faintly glowing object into his hand. It only cast enough light to illuminate their hands, but it was enough for Drifter to see what Mateus gave him. His sunlight medallion. Take this, it will guide you to safety. Go. Mateus pushed him away. Whatever you do, do not stop running. Drifter could hear him draw his sword to face the encroaching swarm. He roared out a challenge into the dark as a final act of defiance. Come and face me, foul fiends. I am Mateus of Abednego, and as long as I draw breath, you shall not pass me. The sounds of combat faded away as Drifter ran deeper into the darkness. Tears burned his eyes as he poured what little strength he had left into his legs. He clutched tightly to Mateus' medallion. Its warmth seeped into his hand. Drifter had no clue where he was going as he crashed into trees and stumbled over roots. It took everything he had to stay on his feet. If he fell, he would not be able to get up. At one point, something buzzed by his head and left a burning sensation on his cheek. As he ran, he noticed the medallion in his hand grow colder. Another collision with a tree turned him around, but as he ran in this new direction, the medallion regained some of its warmth. It clicked for him in an instant. The heat of the medallion would guide him out of this nightmare. It will guide him out of this disaster of a hunt. Drifter was bolstered with newfound vigor as he charged down the invisible path that was laid out before him. He would not waste Mateus' sacrifice. Unfortunately, vigor can only last so long. His body had already reached its limit long ago and the pain was growing unbearable. The forest would not let its prey escape so easily. Something lashed out and tore open a gash in his side and stumbled him, but he would not fall. He was almost sent to the floor when a series of spines lodged themselves into his back, but he managed to push off, back onto his feet before he hit the ground. His only saving grace was that the spines were much smaller than what hit Gerhardt. Despite all his efforts, Drifter's strength was waning. He was coughing up blood and his legs trembled with each step he took. What little hope he had was gone and replaced with panic and despair. Drifter could feel the swarm breathing down his neck. At any moment, it felt like he would be taken down by something from the swarm. The ground became uneven under his feet and he could feel the floor drastically slant upwards. The gods would not play such a cruel trick on him, would they? Like a madman, Drifter scrambled up the hill, falling to his hands and knees in the process. It wasn't as steep as the way they descended into this death trap, but he didn't care as long as it was an escape from this place. The moment he stumbled onto the top, he was blinded by golden rays. Drifter had to shield his eyes from what felt like his first glimpse of sunlight in an eternity. A shining beacon in the dark, the sun rose over the horizon and bathed the land in its morning rays. He couldn't suppress the laughter that bubbled from his throat as he collapsed to his knees. He did it. He survived. His laughter devolved into hysteria as he wasn't sure whether he should celebrate his survival or despair over the fact that he was the only one to do so. Drifter was torn free from his turbulent thoughts by the sound of movement behind him. He craned his head around and saw the swarm slowly creeping up the hill behind him. Flyers flitted through the trees in the rear while the main swarm advanced in a hesitant manner. Were they afraid of the light? It took a lot of effort, but to his surprise, Drifter managed to raise himself onto his feet. Now, with the ever-increasing sunlight, he could get a good look at the creatures. Many were sickly pale with their shells nearly transparent. Some, to his surprise, had fur and animal-like limbs and tails. Were they insects with animal features or animals with insect-like features? A fair number were complete abominations, bearing no resemblance to any known creature, insect or mammal. Whatever they were, it seemed that nothing was free from the corruption and bastardization of the undead curse. How long before all lands ended up as corrupted as this place? There was a small part of him that couldn't help but pity the poor creatures. The swarm hissed, growled and snapped their mandibles in hunger at him. Maybe it was the hysteria still in his system, maybe it was comfort of warm sunlight on his back, or maybe it was the indescribable mental exhaustion he was feeling, but Drifter no longer cared about the threat in front of him. All it would take is a single lunge from one of them to grab his leg and drag him from the sunlight. Drifter may have lacked a proper weapon, but that did not mean he was helpless. He grabbed the beast's tooth that Gerhardt had given him. If they still wanted to fight, then he would not go down easily. For a long moment they stared each other down. Eventually, whatever they saw in him made the swarm decide that he was not worth the effort. The abominations turned and scurried back into the forest. Drifter let out a sigh of relief. He really wanted to lay down and go to sleep under the sun's warm rays, but the weight of the tooth in his hand reminded him that he still had a task to see through. Hopefully the others will revive soon and join him. Best to have everything ready for them to leave as soon as possible. Those villagers better not try to cheat him, not after everything they had been through. He would not be liable for his actions if they tried. Drifter waited by their old campsite they had met up at. It was set alongside the road, so it was easily visible to anyone traveling on it, though travelers had become a rarity over the years. He sat by a campfire and waited for his companions. Beside him were the packs of supplies they were promised. It was not without its share of problems. Some of the villagers tried to claim that since he had not made it back before sunrise, that their agreement was void. To say he lost his temper would be an understatement. Had the village head not stepped in, he was certain he would have spilled someone's blood, even if all he had was the monster's tooth to do so. While the old man had done it purely out of pity, Drifter didn't care. They gave him what was promised, even if he was almost certain that it was less than what Mateusz had battered for. All he could do now was wait. At first, his mind wandered back to their failed hunt. Was there anything he could have done differently? What about Gerhardt and Spearman? He thought about it for a short time before he eventually had to rip himself away from those thoughts. Grief was dangerous for an undead, so he had to put the hunt in him out of mind, at least for now. The time it took for an undead to revive varied, with the means of the death being the only measurable factor. Yet even then it still wasn't guaranteed to play out as expected. Drifter didn't care. He would wait as long as he needed to. Even after the fire went out, he continued to stare into the ashes in an effort to keep his mind blank. The sun rose and fell, but he didn't keep track. Mateusz and the others would make it back, all he had to do was wait. Finally, when the sun was at its peak, did Drifter hear the sounds of someone approaching. He glanced up to see that it was Mateusz. Drifter scrambled to his feet with a smile on his face. Thank the gods. I was worried that. The smile fell from Drifter's as he got closer. There were new wrinkles lining his face and his eyes looked more sunken. In the short time they had been apart, it looked like he had aged a few decades. That didn't stop Mateusz from smiling in return, his eyes filled with relief. Drifter, I am glad to see you escaped in one piece. Are you okay? There were noticeably new nicks and puncture holes in his armor. He already knew what happened to him, but he still needed to hear it. How much did his mentor sacrifice for him? Of all things he could have done, Drifter did not expect his mentor to laugh. Come now, there is no need for you to laden yourself with any blame. I may have left a piece of myself behind in that forest, but I made my choice and I would gladly do so again. Do not worry yourself over a trivial matter. Let us focus on what we do next. Here, take this. I know your sword broke during the fight, so I hope this can suffice in the meantime. Mateusz surprised him when he pushed a familiar-looking spear into his hands. Finally recognizing the lack of their other companions, Drifter glanced around, but could not spy any trace of them. Where are the others? He asked as his throat tightened. Mateusz's smile faded into a more sober expression. Unfortunately, it seems that their deaths were too much for either to handle. Why you mean? He nodded. They hollowed. There is nothing we can do for them. Their shuffling corpses will keep the creatures of the forest occupied for some time at least. That's what Drifter hated most about the curse. It was unpredictable in how it would affect those branded. The uncertainty was the most frightening aspect, which was why a fair many undead still feared for their mortality. When would you hollow? On your 1000th death? Your very first? Will you fade away, piece by piece, until there is nothing left, or would you remain whole and sane only to shatter completely at once? How fragile was the soul? Death was not even a requirement for hollowing. There are even those who were branded and hollowed before they could even experience the sweet release of death. No one knew what their fate would be when their time would run out. He wished that he could brush his fears aside as easily as Mateusz or Gerhardt did. What did they do for the gods to forsake them so? Drifter? Mateusz shook him free from his thoughts. Are you still with me? He nodded. Good. I thought I lost you there for a moment. Look, it may seem cruel, but you cannot dwell on what was lost. We no longer have the luxury to grieve. The curse has robbed us of that right. While we must do our best to not forget the past, we cannot allow ourselves to be trapped by it, otherwise the weight of what we left behind will break us. Keep your focus on what is ahead. Can you do that for me? Yeah, I can do that. Good. Mateusz clapped him on the shoulder. You'll do fine. I have faith in you. Only because I had you to guide me. Drifter offered him his sunlight medallion. I would not have made it were it not for you. Keep it. Mateusz pushed the medallion back. I can see it in you. You have been touched by the light, now it only awaits for you to answer its call. I am not sure if I can. Mateusz chuckled. He walked past to check the packs Drifter had gathered. I still remember the stories about your group. The lengths you and the others went to in order to protect the survivors of that town. I knew that even if only half of what I heard was true, then you all had proven yourselves greater and more noble than most knights I had met. I thought that there was a band of men who knew what it meant to be a beacon to those without hope and understood what it meant to sacrifice for the people. I went searching for you and others so that we may all band together to face these grim times as one, but unfortunately, the others had already hollowed by the time I found them. You were the only one to endure. Mateusz strapped one of the packs to his back before offering the other to him. You may not have much faith in yourself, but I believe that your actions that day were not a one-time thing. When the time comes, I am confident that you will rise to the occasion and surprise us all. Like Spearman did? Him, Pyromancer and Gerhardt. Drifter laughed ruefully. I called him a coward. He averted his eyes. I thought so little of him, yet he saved my life. He traded his life for mine. Mateusz hummed in acknowledgement. The beast was moving to finish you off and I was too far away and too slow to stop it. Spearman taunted and baited the creature to save you. His sacrifice bought me the time I needed to kill it. You may think yourself incapable of standing alone against the darkness of our world in the face of your own demise, but you have endured this long for a reason. Have a bit more faith in yourself. He slapped a hand against his chest. Come on, we still have plenty of daylight to travel by. If we make a good pace, then we can reach that blacksmith in about 2 days. What do we do after? I'm not sure yet. Are you going to stick around or are you going to run off on your own again? I think I will stay for a bit, Drifter responded with a chagrined smile before he waved his new spear about. I am going to have to learn how to wield this properly after all. Fortunately, I do know a bit about handling a spear. When we next set up camp I can show you the basics. I would appreciate it. I stayed by his side for a month before we parted once more. He had heard of others like us and left to aid them while I stayed behind to find myself. Ashen glanced down at Ruby who was huddled against him. Her wide eyes still glistening from her previous tears as she listened, fully enraptured by his tale. I am not sure if it was chance or fate, but after we parted ways I crossed paths with another warrior of sunlight. Was through him that I finally decided to join the Covenant. He took me to one of their few remaining sacred shrines and it was there that I pledged myself. I have been a brother ever since. Ashen offered his medallion for Ruby to hold again. She wiped her eyes before she cradled it in her hands. He could see the newfound reverence she had for it in her eyes. We warriors of sunlight strive to be the embodiment of the sun. Our purpose was to push back the darkness when it encroached on the world and to protect life where we could. Together we stood our ground and served as beacons to others. Man, beast or the abyss itself, we would have gladly faced each to protect what little light exists in this world. We are the promise that no matter how dark the night, the sun will always rise again. You sound like a group of heroes, Ruby said in awe. Ashen chuckled before he took back his medallion. While some in my order have no doubt been granted the title, I would not go so far as to say that for everyone. My covenant is an old one. So old in fact that stories claim that it had been founded by the firstborn of the god Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight. Our Lord was the heir of sunlight and a god of war, hence why valor and skill was favored in our warriors. From fighting in wars to hunting man-eating beasts, we did it all to protect the people. Wow. So what did Mateusz say? Did you ever tell him? I still can't believe he survived such a scary place. Yes, well, he was very hard to kill. As for what he said, to say he was ecstatic the next time we met would be an understatement. He was so proud to call me a brother. From that point on, I risked my life beside him on his many quests to aid and protect others. Whenever we parted, it was no longer due to my weakness, but due to my own desires to aid others no matter the risk. I had a purpose to be proud of. Ashen sighed longingly. I just wish I could remember more of those years. Whatever happened to him? He died. Oh, do you know how he died? Ashen. How he wished he didn't know what happened to him. An ignoble end seemed to await all heroes. He could still remember the burning pyres in the town square surrounded by a fearful crowd. They were stuffed full of undead. Strapped to a pole on top of all of them was an impostor wearing his armor. A hollow that had no right to do so. He was supposed to survive. Superstition was probably the only reason no one had tried to strip his armor. Even now he could hear the mindless and pain-filled wails. His sword was the only thing he had left from his first mentor. It still sat, wrapped in cloth, at the bottom of his bottomless box, a gift from his second mentor. Despite the thousands of years, he still could not muster up the heart to touch it, much less wield it. Ashen? Ashen. Are you okay? Ashen glanced down at Ruby, who was tugging him back and forth. He had honestly forgotten that she was here. As much as he wanted to lie and tell her he couldn't. No. I have not been okay for a long time, Ruby. For a very long time. He placed his hand on her head. But I will endure like I always have. Ruby frowned before taking his hand between hers. Aren't you afraid that you will never get better? Maybe I will, he consoled her. I am finally free from the burdens that I had to shoulder for so long. Now I can take the time to patch the cracks in my soul. Ashen paused as he thought of a change of topic to get away from grim thoughts. As for what I fear, despite what you probably expect, I am afraid of the dark. You're afraid of the dark? She questioned disbelievingly. I am. I'm truly terrified of the dark in every sense. I have had to fight for my life in absolute darkness before, and I have been in situations completely bereft of hope. It is ironic that because of that fear, I am able to stand against it. I know what happens when the light is gone. To say it is unpleasant would be an understatement. That's why you're a warrior of sunlight, Ruby said in understanding. You become your own light when it's gone. Now you are beginning to see. These medallions are said to be a fragment of the sun's rays, so no matter the situation, we are never truly alone. It is proof that our Lord still watches over his warriors. Are you sure your group wasn't a band of heroes? Ruby asked teasingly, her mood rising again. She glanced around the dark forest around them. Is this why you wanted me to be here so early? It was a large reason for it, but there was one more. Ashen motioned toward the rapidly increasing glow on the horizon. The morning sun peeked over the horizon, bathing Ruby's face with its golden rays. The warmth of the sun's light went to work combating the night chill that settled on her skin. When she turned to look at Ashen, she was surprised to find him doing an odd pose. Ashen was standing straight, feet close together and arms in the air, doing his best impersonation of the letter Y. Ruby opened her mouth to ask what he was doing, but then thought better of it. With a shrug she decided why not. She took up a similar pose next to him, her arms stretching toward the sky. You are doing it wrong. Ruby looked at Ashen in confusion. Here, allow me. He stepped behind her and adjusted her hands so her palms were now facing outward. Never praise the sun with your palms facing inward. Ruby craned her head back to look up at him. Why? To do so is to say that you can claim the sun's light as you own. The sun is the father of all and his nurturing warmth is a blessing for everyone. To think otherwise is pure hubris. The sun is really important to you. More than you know. Ever since I joined, I have never willingly missed a sunrise. I never tire of the sight. It is pretty to watch. Ruby couldn't suppress a yawn. Tired? Yeah, she admitted. Would you like to sleep a little longer? Ruby blinked in confusion at his offer. She squeaked in surprise when Ashen scooped her up in his arms. He settled her in his lap as he sat by the cliff. Her blush was doing a much better job of warming her face than the sun was. I will wake you in a bit. As much as she wanted to protest, she did feel tired and she was comfortable. A little bit wouldn't hurt. Only a little bit, okay? He chuckled. Pleasant dreams. Ruby closed her eyes and curled up against him. Despite the fact she was snuggling up against hard armor, Ruby felt more comfortable than if she was laying in her bed. The warmth that flowed into her veins from him soothed her in a way she could never replicate no matter how hard she tried. Any chance of her resisting was lost before it could even begin, and that was before factoring the sunlight's own warmth baking her from the opposite side. In a few moments she was off in dreamland reliving happier times. She didn't even notice that there was someone extra in her dreams. Ashen bathed in the morning rays before he glanced down at the sleeping girl in his lap. Ruby was sleeping quite peacefully, with one small fist under her chin while the other had unconsciously grabbed a hold of his surcoat with a firm grip. She was the epitome of innocence in a moment that no painter could ever hope to capture. Never in his long life had he been so close to a child, not even with the few he had taken under his wing. It was pleasant and he couldn't help but savor the situation. Eventually their tranquility had to come to an end. A chime broke the silence and caused Ruby to stir. Fortunately, it wasn't enough to wake her. Then again, it seemed like it would take something major to pull her from her current dream. Ashen could spot the glow of her scroll through her skirt pocket. Doing his best to not jostle Ruby, he worked to remove one of his gauntlets. Her small size helped in the matter. Shriveled, dried, and dead skin greeted him. The worst of it was around his palm where the skin was so thin that he wasn't sure if he was looking at skin or his ligaments. He had to suppress a dry chuckle. What would she think if she saw this? How would she react if she knew what state his body was truly in? Hopefully she would never have to. He did not want to imagine the look of horror on her face. With his fingers free, he managed to pluck Ruby's scroll from her pocket. On its screen was a message from her father asking her to come home. Luckily, Ruby had spent some time teaching him how to use a few of the basic features of a scroll. It was so much easier to use without a glove getting in the way. While the device's capabilities amazed him, too many of its features sounded like needless distractions to him. He managed to send a short message back to her father telling him that he would bring her home soon. After another glance at her sleeping face, he felt reluctant to parting just yet. Another hour to savor this moment wouldn't hurt. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share, and donate for more videos.